great shows or join the team at sport-social.co.uk.
Hello, welcome back to Red Devils Talk, brought to you by the Football Masterclass. As you can see, it is a Glazers Out special. We've been meaning to do this for a long time, but we haven't really got around to it. But after what we've heard, Ciaran, obviously with the news about the share sales and obviously none of that money going to Manchester United or the club or for footballing purposes, we've got to talk about it. We've got to talk about it authentically. We've got to talk about it properly. We've got to break it down properly. We've got to go through the figures. We've also got to debunk some of the myths because there are some crazy theories out there. And this is not us protecting Glazers, but it's also just a lot of misinformation. So welcome back, Ciaran. How are you doing today? And just give me your quick thoughts, a couple of liners on the Glazer ownership, because I think most of us, pretty much all of us, are absolutely sick of it. And it's sucking the life and enjoyment out of Manchester United at the moment.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't think you can get any sort of United fan and have anything positive to say about the Glazers. I guess the good thing about the show that today is we can actually provide some balance, because we can all agree how bad that the Glazers are, but also we need to kind of debunk some of those myths that when you see something in relation to them, that a million fans on Twitter and Instagram straight away go in at them for, when it's nothing to do with them. So I think today is good that we can actually highlight the kind of how they've kind of devastated the club over the last whatever it is since 2005, but also then kind of separate that to what they also get blamed for, which has nothing to actually do with them as well.
Absolutely. And this, again, I'm just going to put in the disclaimer because I think there will be people that think it is. We're not apologists for them at all. Not at all. And, myself and Joe did a lot of podcasts over the summer, didn't we, Joe, last year? And the amount of times we'd have this conversation, the amount of times we go in, I just want to actually break it down. Let's just start by talking about some of the figures. So let's just start at the beginning, Joe. They bought the club in a leverage buyout by taking loans out on the club's assets. That in itself is a massive problem. Guys, we will talk about, the anti-Glazer protests or what can actually be done. We'll do that at the end. We just want to go through the history and actually highlight the real atrocity that they've done to the football club. So they didn't pay a single penny of their own money and saddled the club with debt, and that was 790 million. The club had been debt-free for 75 years, Joe, since 1931. That in itself it's a crime. It's an absolute crime. I know in business terms what they've done, and it's legal in that sense, but to do what they've done and to buy the club in that means, and then to do what they have done with the club in terms of just extracting money day in, day out, not putting a single penny of their own money, is absolutely disgusting. It's inexcusable. It's a crime as far as I'm concerned. And we're at a situation now as fans, aren't we, Joe, where it's almost as if a lot of fans have lost complete faith in anything. They don't know what they can do to change and get rid of these horrible owners.
Yeah, look, like you said, Haider, that the way the whole club was bought was flawed, absolutely flawed. And the biggest issue about it all is that we don't hear from these guys. And let's be honest, the Glazers as well, they had an 8-year holiday when they first took over the club, because in my opinion, Alex Ferguson was covering over all the cracks with his performances on the pitch, and people were sort of like, we were still winning titles, we were still winning trophies, and people were okay with it. And then, people started to see sense, didn't they, around about 09, 10, I think it was. And that's when it really started to come to the fore, because they weren't back in Fergie. We knew Fergie's time was coming towards an end, and we knew that transition would come, and therefore, they would struggle to hide it any longer. When you haven't got a coach and players on the pitch that can sort of cover up what's going on in the background, it becomes a problem for them. And I think that's why it's come more to the fore over recent years, because obviously we've lost Sir Alex Ferguson. But yeah, I mean, it's inexcusable what they've done, Haider. And you look at this now, and you look at the decisions that they're making, even this share sale, and I think they've looked at it and thought fans will be coming back to the stadiums really soon. Next season. If we do this now, we haven't got fans in the ground at the moment. People can't come near the stadium to protest. I think the timing of what they've done right now is really, really clever. Well, clever from their point of view, not from ours. And that's I don't like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ciaran, let's go to the second part. So the Glazers have taken, well, now it's over 200 million in dividend payouts since the takeover. Now, look, a business is going to take out dividends, and that's the important thing. If they are putting money into the club and they're taking out a dividend at the end of the year, because remember, Manchester United is still a business. I'm not saying that that's all it is, because at the moment, that's what it is, just a business. It's not a football club anymore. You need to do both, because the commercial success is going to inevitably help you to buy players. But the biggest problem is, Ciaran, that when you've got the commercial success, which is what it is now, we're Man United PLC, not Man United Football Club, and they're taking out money and not putting any in. It's inexcusable. Now it's over 200 million. You have the 18 million that they've just taken out. I believe you spoke off air, I think in January, as you said. And the other problem as well, Joel Glazer is the one that sanctions the signings. And he only does that when he's convinced, when he sees value. Now, a lot of this I prepared last summer, so that's what I'm going through, guys. I'm going through some of my research from last summer. And now, obviously, we've got the director of football and technical director. Well, let's see how that works out. We can't sit here and say it's going to work or not. But the fact that someone who's got the football knowledge of a baked bean is literally going to be the one that's saying where I see value. What is value to them, Ciaran? What is value? And then the last point I'm going to make, and it says here that at its highest, and this is what I wrote at the time, interest payments on the debt were 60 million a year. So not only are Man United saddled with debt that isn't theirs, they're paying out money to service their loan. 60 million that could have gone into infrastructure could have gone into the city. Because look at what Manchester City's owners, whatever sports washing they're doing, Ciaran, the amount of money they put into the surrounding areas around that horrible Stockport club, compared to what we've done. What have they done? We've got a dilapidated stadium. It's falling apart. It's absolutely disgusting. What are your thoughts on that? Obviously, you're a finance guy. You're in finance as well, so you're able to provide a better analysis of this. And guys, we're going to read out some of your comments and keep them coming in. Thanks a lot for your interaction. And can you retweet this as well? If you're new here as well, give us a subscribe. We'd love to hear from you guys more in the comments, and retweet it on Twitter, because we'll get as many people in here. Because the problem is that United fans, when it's transfer season, we go and do Glazers Out, and then when it's not, we just sit silently, and it's wrong for me.
Yeah, look, what I'll start off on is probably the whole idea around the dividends. Pretty much 99% of profitable businesses, owners and shareholders, get paid a dividend at the end of the year. It's the reason why people invest into businesses. Now, when we look at sports franchises and sports clubs, ideally the main investors and shareholders are owners, and there's not that many other shareholders in a lot of teams. And the reason why you don't hear of other owners taking a dividend is because they pay themselves a salary, and also anything extra they add into the club that they reinvest. That's what a lot of businesses will do. So like businesses such as Amazon and even you look at Tesla and things like that, because it's kind of the same ownership, they don't pay out dividends every single year, because what they do is they'll reinvest it, so then the business actually makes more money the following year, and they keep moving this on until their projections feel like this is going to slow down, and then dividends start being paid out. So the reason why we hear about Manchester United paying out dividends is simply because the Glazers don't reinvest into the club. If the Glazers reinvested into the club, they would still pay themselves an exorbitant amount of money, but we wouldn't hear about them taking a dividend, because officially they wouldn't take one. They could have paid themselves more money, and then they'll just say, well, it's just being vested for the next year. That's what you hear with, do you really think Roman Abramovich doesn't take money out of Chelsea for himself? He does, but what it isn't done is, it's not done in the form of a dividend. It's he's on the books where he earns a salary, and that increases every single year. But the difference is he reinvests into the football club because it makes it more profitable. The problem is the Glazers don't actually want to do that because they want their estate to earn more money instead of their businesses. And that's the biggest problem that they have. In terms of the buyout of the club, yeah, it's difficult. It would never happen now because there's regulators that stop this style of buyouts of sports clubs. You can look at probably the most recent examples are probably in the NBA because there's not many other big sports clubs that have been bought over the last 10 years, but there's been 2 or 3 in the NBA. So there's a lot that you can look through there. But in terms of how the Glazers did it, the one factor that's a little bit different is they did spend some of their money on it, but it was very small. It was 270 million, but they bought it for a lot more. And most of
that was to get the shares initially so that they could do what they did.
Yeah. So
can you explain that a little bit more, just to understand? Because remember as well, Sir Alex Ferguson did enable this, and I love Sir Alex like he's my grandfather. I think everyone does. But he had a falling out over the horse, what was it called, the Rock of Gibraltar, and he wanted the owners out. I can't remember now. Someone in the comments will be able to. And essentially, what happened was that he enabled the Glazers to get in because of a dispute. And while Fergie's done so many amazing things, this was his biggest mistake, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. The problem is, and in terms of Ferguson, I think it was JP McManus or something that was one of the owners from that he fell out with. And the thing is, if the Glazers didn't come and buy it, somebody was going to, because it was there, pretty much public, and look, business people were going to come in, and unfortunately, when there's vulnerabilities in the Premier League like there was, where teams could get taken over as easy as it was for someone to take over Manchester United, if it wasn't the Glazers, somebody else would have done it. And other people may have reinvested into the club years on, but the same style of buyout probably would have happened. So, yeah, like you said, they spent the money to get the minimum shares in order to be able to purchase the club. But then the rest of the money that they had to dig up in order to kind of get the value of the club was all through interest payments, repayments, certain fees and closing fees and things like that all happened within trades and in a lot of takeovers. Very kind of normal stuff that happens, just not as much as you saw with the acquisition of Manchester United. You'll see in many businesses that you'll see 50, 60, 70 million in these repayments over time is normal, and depending on how big the takeover is. But generally you don't hear about it too much because it's usually a company taking over another company, which one company is very profitable, another company maybe is smaller but has a niche in some market, so they take it over to try and add to their company. You see the thing with the likes of when Facebook took over WhatsApp and things like that. You see that all the time. The biggest problem that I have with it is just the reinvestment and actually the factors that we saw that went into it. You mentioned Alex Ferguson. Obviously, some of the other factors were that Ed Woodward is pretty much the architect on how it all happened. So and look, there was other shareholders at the time that were happy to sell. I hate saying it, but like David Gill sold 1.3 million worth of shares in the Glazers.
A lot of money from it, yeah.
So there was a lot. Yeah, so there was a lot of people that were ingrained within the club that a lot of people and fans trusted that sold shares to the Glazers. And the problem is, yes, they would have had a majority ownership, but they wouldn't have had as much as they have now, where they basically have the sole control of the football club, over 75%, basically. I think that might have gone a little bit lower than 75 this week. But again, it's when you have more than, usually it's about 65%, you pretty much can decide anything that happens within a business. Because if you have, let's say, 51, but the rest is divided out, eventually what ends up happening is if the company doesn't do well and you have to sell parts of your shares, that then goes down and then you lose kind of control of the business. So this is kind of one of the biggest problems. So you see like David Gill, we saw Ferguson didn't exactly want to stop this from happening. And look, as they say, the rest is history. You have the likes of Ed Woodward, who gets paid, what was it, above $3 million a year to be their advisor, to be their CEO. But that's basically what he was. He advised them on how to take over the club and what way to do it and what way
'cause he was a financial specialist working at JP Morgan, and he got rewarded essentially by be given the top job out of any club in the world, really, on the biggest salary, and he's got absolutely zero footballing knowledge. And now obviously we've seen him move to Ciaran. But what I actually want to quickly address, Ciaran, is that I want to talk about, and look guys, we're going to get to last summer as well, because last summer is really important, the impact of COVID. We're going to run through the finances. I sat down with Kieran Maguire, who's the football finance absolute guru. You know, he's the best in the business, and we discussed why Sancho didn't happen, essentially. So what I'll do after this as well is I'll retweet the link under this, and you guys can have a listen to that. That was all the way back in the summer. You know, excuse the quality. I was only in the podcasting game for about a couple of months or so a little bit better now. But look, so Ciaran, what I want to talk about is something which Swiss Football is that really great account he put up. So in the terms of total financing, 2 clubs have received you know, the most in the last 5 years. That's been Tottenham and Chelsea. So that's in terms of, you know, your ownership putting money in, essentially. And that Tottenham 521 million for their stadium, Chelsea 433 million. We know Abramovich is a little bit of a game for him. Arsenal and Man United are the 2 clubs who have outflows of 169 million and 101 million respectively over the last 5 years. So out of all the top clubs, our owners, who are both American owners, who have a certain model of running things, they're the ones who have taken money out. It's just inexcusable, isn't it? And you can understand why fans are upset and why fans are angry.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's tough when you look at it and you see the debt right now is the highest it's been since 2011. You also, like, you can look at many other things that it just doesn't seem to be getting better. You mentioned the total financing. It's even the total investment that's kind of gone into the club, where I think United are at, they had negative 89. So 89 million was paid to the Glazers. Well, if you go on the opposite end, we mentioned Chelsea in total financing. And I'm pretty sure Abramovich, in the last 5 years, I think they did it for, had invested over 400 million into the football club. So it's a big difference there. So it's something that's not going to change, unfortunately. So I think that's really what we have to do, is we just have to realize kind of what this is. And it's good that we have this talk right now, because again, it's something that I don't think is spoken about enough unless we miss out on a transfer. And that's when we hear this, and that's the problem.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest problem, that I feel like we're all guilty of it, but I think too many, when we don't get the big Jadon Sancho, the new shiny signing Joe, that's when all the Glazers out start. And with all due respect, right, some people won't like this, but what does that achieve? A couple of hashtags. I honestly, that is my opinion. I really think it's absolute rubbish. Do you think they care that they're seeing Glazer out trend? I really don't think so. Sorry, guys. Look, I know a lot of you do some really great stuff, and I really respect what you guys are doing, but the only way that you're going to make changes is in the stadium physically. And the problem is, Joe, is that you have a walkout.
Yeah.
United have got, 700 million fans around the world. When 50, 60,000 don't want their tickets, there's going to be 50, 60,000 waiting, chomping at the bit to get a new contract. A new season ticket. So I mean, this is a real issue, isn't it? Like, it's a real.
And problem. This is what I touched on at the top of the show, Haider. You know, this is why I think this whole share thing that they've taken out recently now. Look at the timing of it. There is no fans in stadiums, so there can be no protest with a mass walkout. Nobody's allowed near the football stadium, so there's no chance of anybody starting a march around the ground, anything like that. I'd be honest with you, call me cynical, but I think they've really thought about the timing of all this and when they're doing it. You know, they really have. They're not stupid people. And I think they'll look at social media And they can brush it off, Haider. Like you said, they can brush off a few hashtags. They can ignore that. They can turn a blind eye to it. It doesn't bother them. They were talking in the conference call recently how they've got one of the quickest growing TikTok accounts going, which is absolutely ridiculous. So social media, they feel like they're really blossoming on there. They feel like it's a real strength of theirs. So they are not worried about a few hashtags trending. What really makes a difference to United is when you see movement. So you think about the movement we saw in 2010. When the stadium was full and literally a large proportion, I can't put a percentage on it, but a large proportion of the fans were there waving these green and gold scarves, the one that you got there. They're things that people take notice of. They're the things that...
Bex, do you remember it was AC Milan 2011, I think, and David Beckham, someone threw it on the pitch.
Yeah,
David Beckham, that's when it was at the peak of its powers, yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? Businesses look at that, Haider. Noodle companies, car companies, all these people that are sponsoring us now, they look at that. And if they see that on television and they see unrest like that, they see a business that's a little bit unstable, a little bit rocky, therefore they don't invest. Therefore, that money that, Woodward's done so well to generate doesn't come in. But the thing is it's very difficult to sustain that, Haider, because, like I said, around that time as well, United were coming close to winning things. They were being successful. So people were turning their energy from turning on the Glazers back to supporting the club as it got towards the end of the season because you wanted to win something. You had a manager and players telling you, come on, let's concentrate on the football on the pitch. All managers of all clubs, when there's an issue with the ownership off, they're always telling fans out there to focus on what's going on the pitch. They want the players to concentrate on that. It's a real tricky situation. But I think what annoys fans at the moment as well is, we're told in these conference calls about COVID and the impact of COVID on what United can do in the summer. It's not affecting their revenue streams, Haider. From the outside looking in, people who don't have a great grasp of the numbers, and I've got to be honest, I'm one of them. It's brilliant to hear what Ciaran was saying there because that sort of handle on things I haven't got. But, fans looking in like me, we're hearing them all the time saying it's going to be a difficult summer because of COVID, this, that, and the other because of COVID. But yet, they're still taking a large dividend out of the club and their revenue streams don't seem to be affected either. So you can understand why fans like myself who don't understand all aspects of it get so frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to read out a comment here from Ranak because I think it's absolutely rubbish. And this is part of the problem. I'm sorry. I'm going to call you out on this. Why is it inexcusable? Are you going to work for Man United for free? No one said that. I don't know when you've jumped into this podcast because we were literally just saying that, talking about dividends and how big companies can take dividends, and United is still a business as well as a football club. You're saying, does Rashford play for free? They own the club. They can do whatever they want, whatever they can. I don't know when you've jumped in. So I hope that, if you haven't jumped in from the beginning, please watch the beginning. I'm not going to repeat it because there's people here, but that's the exact attitude of why nothing will change. And maybe nothing will change, but that's not the point. They shouldn't be allowed to buy the club in the way that they did. Okay, I can understand you can own the club, but when they're taking money out, and we're going to talk about the transfers now, actually, Ciaran, and how much money has been spent, because an extensive amount of money has been spent, but also a lot of that money has been spent badly. So we have to talk about that. But to have that attitude that, they can do what they want, that is the problem. That is right at the root of the problem at this football club. There's too many fans that have this attitude of, I can't do anything about it. It doesn't matter whether you live just outside Old Trafford, you live all the way in Australia. It does not matter. We all love the club exactly the same. We all got to pull together. And having that attitude and defeatism and allowing them to do what they do is disgusting and wrong. So you're entitled to have your opinion on it, but I'm going to call you out because you're absolutely wrong. So Ciaran, look, let's talk about last summer, because I think that's really important, guys. We need to talk about, and look, Ranak, we're going to talk about the money spent, but you have to understand as well, the money spent, 1.2 billion, is the money that Manchester United generated themselves, not the Glazers. So to say that they've spent the money, it's the money that we generate. United is a self-sustaining model, Ciaran. United could be owned by the fans and still survive on the money they generate. Think about it. Nearly £1 billion has been spent on the debt. Nearly £1 billion. That £1 billion could have been invested into the club, into everything. The structure, the stadium, the training ground. Carrington is old. Look at Leicester's new training ground. Cost 80 million. We gave them 80 million for Maguire, and they've gone and bought a brand spanking. No, they made a brand spanking beautiful training ground. Look at Spurs' training ground. If you watch the documentary, look at their stadium. Man United should be best in class. So to say that it's theirs and they can do what they want, or they've spent the money, is absolute nonsense. I'm not going to take it. It's rubbish. Wake up, smell the coffee. Seriously, people, we need to do that. Sorry, I'm getting so annoyed. It's just, it hurts when people have this attitude. It really hurts because you know what? I feel like with this club over the past 7 years, we're just going around in a circle and we feel like we're just about getting our head above water and we're sucked back down again. Why? Because the owners won't back the managers properly. And, you know, I love this club to death. I'm not from Manchester, but I love this club to death. And there's people that get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to watch United play. We have to try and do something about it and talk about it and not just accept our fate. It's nonsense. Anyway, sorry for the rant, guys. It's just I get emotional about it because I love this club so much, and it just hurts because there's people that don't care about the way that we're run. They just want to make money out of us, and us fans are stupid enough just to allow it. That's the reality. So, Ciaran, let's talk about last summer. Obviously, we had COVID, and COVID was it was a massive effect on Manchester United. And when you're looking at it, United's most important thing, like any club, was just to survive. You know, our wage bill was 25 million a month, which just equates to a massive amount. It really does, you know. And what we saw is that 110 million per year on tickets. Obviously, some of them were deferred and paid back, and some of them were, you know, were not obviously paid out because no fans were in the stadium. And I think one of the biggest things that people were forgetting is United were losing 4 to 5 million per game at Old Trafford. That's a huge amount per game. And, you know, they were quite anxious, the owners, generally about our model, because we don't have the same model as Chelsea. And that's why fans get upset, because the business model of Chelsea and Manchester City is that the owners will pump money in. So Abramovich, for example, last summer, guys, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this. They sold one of their spare business. He sold one of his spare businesses for 1,500 million. And he put a little bit of that into Chelsea. Why do they have so much money to spend? Because, by the way, if Abramovich leaves tomorrow, Chelsea will go bust. They make loss upon loss upon loss every single year. But they've got an owner that it's a little bit of a plaything for him. And then you had, obviously, Manchester City with the CAS verdict. But they were allowed in the Champions League. They had money to spend. United and Liverpool last season, Ciaran, especially in the summer, they were in a sticky situation for sure. We had that 140 million overdraft, but the overdraft was not used for transfers. No. It was used because the Glazers didn't want to put any of their own money. If they'd put in 100 million of their own money in, Ciaran, we would have been able to buy Sancho. We'd have been able to fix certain areas of the team. We would have been able to still pay all the wages plus more. It was a real issue, wasn't it? And this is why the fans get upset.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it's something that people didn't realize. Now, we had a working capital at that time. So basically the amount of money that they had within the club, they had about 52 million. And then they got the 150 revolving credit. That was to do in case there was any mistakes or if there was any problems with COVID. Because look, it's where I do have a little bit of sympathy for all the owners, is where they had no idea what was going to happen. We were still pretty much engrossed in everything that was going on with coronavirus. We didn't know. There was no sign of vaccines or anything coming up. The fact that we are now a year into it and the closest we have to any fans being in the stadium is the last weekend of the Premier League, it shows. And the fact that that's happening means that things will turn around, because prospective buyers can see, okay, well, money is going to come in from next season. So there's a difference. But when you have to go through a whole year, and like you said, you're losing roughly about 45 million every single match day, it's difficult for them. But again, there's no excuse when you do see other owners investing into their clubs. Look, I think the problem is that the Glazers will never be owners that want to invest, because they see Manchester United as it is self-sustaining, that they don't need to put in any money. If they don't need to put any money in, why should they? That's how they view it. It's like if you own a couple of businesses and you see you have one business that makes its own money, you pay all your costs, and also it leaves you with a healthy profit. Why do you need to invest more money into it? Us as fans don't like that, because, well, we want to see the football club improve. To them, when you look at it as business, the business model works. The problem is the football model doesn't. And it's a lot trickier. They treat Manchester United like a regular business, which if this wasn't a football club, it would actually be a sound business model. But because it's a football club and you constantly need to improve and you constantly need investment because, as we say, things get old, stadiums get old, facilities get old. They need to be revamped all the time. The problem is Manchester United haven't had any of that since they took over in 2005. And look, it's probably going to get to 20 years before any major improvements are going to be made at the stadium. Look, I know that there are talks of there will be changes made with the stadium. We've seen it with the latest. They've improved a lot of the technology around the stadium, but it's still, there's a lot of work to do there. There's really not much there, and that's the problem. When we look at what happened last summer, it's a very difficult one to quantify because you look at every other team, and other than the very few, so you look at City, you look at Chelsea, there wasn't a lot of money spent. And the reason why is because a lot of owners had no idea what was going to go on. So I don't like giving them kind of any sort of sympathy because they should have invested into the club when they had the chance. But it's one of those that when you don't know when, for example, the coronavirus is going to end, for one thing is how do you know where all the investment's going to go, or how do you know what will help going forward? Because you don't know when it's going to turn around. If somebody told them for definite coronavirus is going to be over or it's going to turn around in 12 to 18 months, well, then you can plan as an owner to see, okay, what investment does the club need to be able to stay afloat and to be able to still remain profitable. But the problem is when something happens like the coronavirus, which again, it's a once in maybe a century when something like that happens. Like I can't remember when the Spanish flu was, but that was kind of the last previous pandemic that a lot of businesses had to kind of be wary of. So for them, I understand, and to a certain extent, kind of them not spending a lot of money because they don't know when all that money's going to come back in. But we can see in recent reports, last quarter, so ending December, was the first time Manchester United made a profit since the pandemic. So it turned around pretty quick because Manchester United is a very successful business. But now what will tell you how much kind of they cared about and how much the pandemic actually meant to it versus what they wanted to do as their own business model will tell you what they do in the summer. Because if they made a profit in quarter four, if you see they continue to make a profit in quarter one and quarter two of 2021, what that will tell you is that the club is profitable and there's no reason not to spend money because you should be your share price, and now we're going to mention this, will only continue to go up as there's going to be a new kit deal that happens very soon. There's also going to be more fans that can go into the stadium again. So you'll start to see the money go up, and that's why you'll see the share price go up. It goes to what Joe said, that Avram Glazer picked the perfect time to sell part of those shares. The reason was it was the first time in 14 months that the share price went above $20 per share. And that's the reason why it went up. There's no other reason he sold it. That's the only reason he sold it, is because it hit $20 per share.
Yeah. Go on, Joe.
I'm just looking at some of the comments, to be fair, and you put one up there about the supporters and the supporters trust in that. And I think it's a real good point, because what I've noticed, and for those of you who don't know, I'm a disabled fan. So we used to have a guy who used to take care of all the sort of disability needs at Manchester United, and he used to be really good at fighting things against the Glazers, because he used to be able to threaten them against, equality laws, diversity law, everything like that. But the Glazers are very good at putting these people in positions where they can no longer challenge them. So, for example, this guy who used to fight for everything, for disability rights, equality and everything, equal playing field and things like that, he got moved onto the board, which was a paid position. And therefore, he lost all his leverage to sort of threaten the club and threaten the Glazers that they weren't doing enough for this, that, and the other different aspects of making games more accessible, making the ground more accessible. And I think that that's what you've seen with aspects of the supporters trust, people calling out there, the fan, the supporters groups and things like that. When they become too influential and when they see these people as a threat, they bring them into sort of paid positions at the club, and therefore they don't then have that leverage to sort of threaten the Glazers, because all of a sudden you're threatening your boss who's paying you a wage and giving you money.
They're employees. So essentially, like they're paying you to be quiet, but then you're an employee, so you can't say anything. And I think
exactly.
that's what,
and they're very clever at doing that, and that's how they get around a lot of the, that's how they nullify a lot of the dangers and threats to the way that they want to run this business.
It's a great point, Joe, and like, it's a great insight, because obviously, look, there's a lot of you. I mean, you're disabled and you sit where you sit, but they did move you for a time, didn't they?
They've recently expanded, but that's because of law, and that's all football clubs having to do that at the moment. They've got no option. They'll be in trouble. But for 20 years, the man who was in charge, a man called Phil Downs, was for everything. He got us a lot more than we should have got, but he did it because he used to. He put threats in play. I'm not going to lie, he taunt the club, but they then very quickly got wide to it, and like I say, they put him on the board. And you could see overnight how his influence changed, how he became a different person. He wasn't someone you could approach anymore. He passed over responsibility. He was more of a figurehead now than anyone who could really do change. So that's what they do. They're so clever, and they're great businessmen. And that's not a praise to them. It's just they know how to manipulate the system, and they know how to work the system perfectly.
Well, they've leveraged United's brand. Some would say pillaged. For a stronger word, but they've leveraged United's brand, and they've made United so big. And that's why I want to bring up this comment from Best in Cantona. Thanks for getting involved, mate. And look, there's similar comments here, Raunak saying, what do you expect? Sorry, it's over here. Realistically speaking, how many people can afford this club at present? And that's the biggest problem, Ciaran. Something I've had discussions with other people about this, and United's worth 4 billion. There's no way in hell anyone could buy that apart from the Saudis. And again, that brings up other, I guess,
ethical problems.
Yeah, other problems, moral problems as well. I mean, they murder people if you speak out against them. They've got terrible human rights. Yeah. For me, that's a step too far. And I know this is going to be unpopular, but, like I've told this story before, but my granddad used to work in Saudi, back in the day. My dad grew up there. He was born in the UK, but he grew up there. And overnight, they took all my granddad's money. He had to flee in the middle of the night, took everything, and he came back to this country with, he had a house here. But the point is that they are a worse proposition. They really are. They're just the stuff that they do. And for me, it would kill me to see people like that take over our club. Now, United might be successful, but where's the line drawn? We all love football so much, but I mean, there's someone here saying Jeff Bezos. Yeah, that's the sort of person that United need. Genuinely someone who's got 20, 30, 40 billion, someone like Elon Musk or someone like that. But that's the reality. United is so big now. It's almost as if it's not, you cannot buy it. Not a single person can buy it. Even the fans. I mean, there's a comment here again from Best in Cantona saying the Red Knights did offer 2 billion in 2010. Glazers wouldn't sell. Is there anything?
Because there was more money to be made, Haider. There was so much more money to be made. Look where we are. Fast forward now, they could foresee all this money they were going to make.
They've doubled the value. And Ciaran, it's a difficult and sad prospect, isn't it? It's almost resignation that what can you do? They will sell on their terms.
Yeah, and this is what I keep saying, and I see all the comments there of different people that could have the money to buy it. But just because someone has the money to buy it doesn't mean that the Glazers are going to sell it. So, like, if the club could be worth 4 billion, someone could offer 6 billion, and they could still say no because it's their business. So they own it. So they have the choice to whether to sell it or not. And that's the problem about the Premier League, how there wasn't a one ruling body. You look in any other sports league, and look, I constantly mention the NBA, NFL, and MLB, mainly because they have probably the strongest sporting bodies there. So, like, for example, if you want to buy an NBA team, most of the time you have to go through the NBA. And also, one of the biggest things is if there's an NBA owner that has done things that I always go back to, kind of Donald Sterling with the LA Clippers. That I know there was a lot of abuse and stuff that came out about him, and he was basically forced to sell the team. So the thing is, the Premier League was never a strong unit. If it was a strong unit and a strong body, as I mentioned, the Glazers would have never gotten through to be able to buy the club in the first place. But also, there would actually be certain things that they would have done that would have allowed for there to be questions whether they should actually continue owning the club. Problem is, can't do that now because they've been the owners for so long. And I know there was a comment talking about what can the UK government do? They can do absolutely nothing because you can't take businesses off owners for no reason. And just because
we're a capitalist economy, capitalist country, you just can't do that, unfortunately.
You can't do that, and it sucks because people will always ask you and have this debate with them is, why don't we get somebody that's really wealthy that can buy a club that has the money? But it goes back to the point that I mentioned is why would they sell? They own Manchester United, which is worth $4.5 billion. They own Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is worth $2.5 billion. So why would they sell either of those teams? Because they're making so much money from it anyway. It's worth more to them now to not sell it than to sell it. What will happen? The only time that the club will get sold is when they die. Unfortunately, that's just the way it works.
There's a question here, Ciaran, just to ask this to you. Like Liverpool fans took previous owners to court. Can United fans do the same? I think the difference is, one thing I absolutely despise, obviously, Liverpool, but they rallied together and they got outside Anfield and they did what they had to do. But the difference is, Ciaran, that they were about to go into administration. That's the difference. United self-sustaining. We talk about, yes, the debt is crippling United. They're crippling United in the sense that we can't go and buy who we want to buy. That's how they're crippling United. But United is not going to go down tomorrow. United is completely self-sustaining. And I think that's the biggest problem. Yeah.
In the last quarter. So that's the biggest difference. It'd be different if United were losing a load of money and they weren't able to pay players and you were seeing that there was a lot of financial issues. Look, if that happened, they would just sell anyway because they don't need... They use Manchester United because it's a way of having that earning power. All they care about now is the value of the club. That's literally it, because we can talk about whatever finances that we want. We can talk about the debt. We can talk about this. And a lot of people they don't have the right concept when it comes to the debt going up. Every single company has debt.
Let's debunk some of the myths, Ciaran. So I want to talk about the debt because a lot of people, debt isn't really an issue for a company. Can you just explain that in the most simple layman terms? And the other one I want to debunk as well, and don't worry, Joe, I'll come to you about transfers in a minute. But one I want to debunk is this idea that people say that they're taking money out of Manchester United and putting it into Tampa. That's not happening at all. And this is not me protecting them. It's just not happening. Like we saw Tom Brady get a new contract. He got a salary cut. So this idea that people say that other people say Kroenke's taking money out of Arsenal, putting it into Rams. No, he's not. You can't legally. You can't do that. They're not doing that at all. You think the Glazers are putting their own money into Tampa? No, they're not taking their dividends out of Man United and putting it into Tampa. No, they're self-sustaining models. So, we're not protecting them, Ciaran. But just explain, that those 2 points in a little bit more depth.
Yeah, look, most businesses have debt because most businesses take out loans to pay for different things. Whether you can be paying for new premises, you can be paying for vehicles, you can pay for all this, even just from the small businesses. It doesn't have to be Manchester United. When you take out a loan, you owe money to a bank, which is basically you're in debt to the bank. So it's the same sort of thing for Manchester United, except for it's the debt. Just normally businesses will pay off their debt, and then once it renews, they have a good credit rating, so they can do it again. But with Manchester United, they don't have to do that because of the brand of Manchester United. So banks will always give more credit. That's where you see the revolving credit that came through for 150 million in 2020, that they can continue doing that because they know eventually the business is worth so much that they'll be able to pay it all back. So all they do is they pay a small amount of interest on it every single year. So then it shows that, well, we're still paying it. We're going to pay it, but we want more and more and more. So That's basically what it is. United having the biggest debt now compared to 2011 really has no say in how the business is run, because having that debt, a lot of it is actually from them getting money into the club and for themselves.
The issue is this, though, that they're not putting their own money in and doing interest-free loans. That's the problem. And also the debt's not being whittled down, obviously, and the debt's not Manchester United. That's an issue. If United had £200 million of debt and they were paying 0.5% on it, it's not really an issue. The issue is that we've still got nearly 800 million still saddling the club. And the fact is of the matter is that if we wanted, you're thinking about that money that they're paying, let's say it's 60 million a season, I believe at the moment they're paying on the debt. That 60 million could go and get you a top defensive midfielder, can go and get you Pau Torres, who United have been linked to. Do you know what I'm trying to say? That's where it comes in. I think that's people saying that
makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense. But I think the people that worry about having so much debt, the only thing United worry about on a yearly basis is just paying those interest rates on the debt, which is roughly about 60 or 70 million a year. The problem is when we talk about the overall debt, that it's over 800 million or whatever. Eventually, when Manchester United is sold, that debt will be cleared off, because that'll be part of the deal, that whoever buys it will have to clear that debt off. And so really the only thing that the debt affects for Manchester United is that they have to pay these interest repayments every single year. That's basically what the biggest issue is. And when you look at it as at a size of a business as Man United, you mentioned it perfectly. Yeah, it can affect your transfers, but in terms of an overall business and the club's finances and how healthy the club is, it doesn't really affect it too much. It's not a good look for a big business to have to continuously roll over their debt every single year, because most businesses pay it off and then they qualify for more.
I just want to clarify with this comment from Jamie. Guys, thank you for all your input as well. If you're new here, please smash the subscribe button, and give this a retweet. We want to see more people listening to this conversation. No, we're not saying that the United's debt is good. We're not saying that, please. No one's saying that. What Kieran's trying to explain that big businesses have debt. And, if United had, let's say, 200 million in debt and they were paying a little bit interest on that, that's not that bad. The issue, we know it's bad for United because, one, it's been 15 years and we've hardly taken a dent into it. That's a problem. And two, because of that, and the owners won't put any interest-free loans, as one of the comments said, that's why it's an issue, because what's happening now is that when United want to go and get an extra 50, 60 to 100 million on transfers, one, at least half of that, a chunk of that's going to pay the interest on the debt. And two, the owners aren't putting their own money in. So we're always going to be 2, 3, 4 players away from challenging for the title. And that's the problem. Joe, I know you've got something to say, and then I will come to you after. I want to talk about last summer's transfer dealings. And I want to talk about historically as well, what we spent. And actually, we will discuss, do United spend a little bit less when they're not in the Champions League? We know that's true.
Just a quick point, really. I mean, Ciaran's absolutely spot on, with everything that he's saying. But what I just want to say as well is all these rival fans who sort of look at United and sort of taunt them and take the mick, they have to be very careful, because I think the Glazers have set a very dangerous precedent here. And, you look at some of the other Premier League clubs, we know Arsenal have an issue with their owners and the investment that's been put into them. I look at Liverpool and, you wonder whether the Liverpool model's going in a very similar direction. I mean, you have to look at the success that they've had over the last 2 or 3 years and say that, yes, we know they bought the likes of Van Dijk and Alisson, but when they won the league last season, they didn't really go again this summer, did they? We know they needed something in January. There was a lack of investment from them again in January. I wonder if, other clubs are going down a very similar way. And I don't mean to be funny, but the common denominator is American owners. It seems to be this thing about American owners who own other franchises, businesses, whatever you want to call them. And I just think that, this isn't only going to be a problem for Manchester United down the line. It's going to be a problem for several other big clubs in the league. And when does somebody then try and intercept? When does the Premier League have to come in? It's just like Manchester United, Liverpool, go. That does the Premier League no good. The brand for the Premier League is shocking. So there will come a point when they have to intercept, and I think that's a good point. And the point that Ciaran makes about the debt as well. You know, we're wanting people to buy this football club. If they're looking at the price of the football club, then there's a debt on top of that. That becomes a less appealing prospect than it already is anyway, doesn't it? You know what I mean? I mean, if 4 billion is not enough to make somebody bath, 4 billion plus all that debt on top, it just enhances the problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, the biggest issue that I have is you look at it, and if the Glazers tomorrow said, okay, we're putting the club up for sale for 4 billion, there would be people there to buy it. That's the problem is they don't want to sell. Yeah. And I don't want to get people confused when it comes to when I speak about debt, that it's something that's a positive thing. It's not, because like we mentioned, they've had it for 15 years now. Eventually, most businesses do pay it off. And then after that, they'll go in and they'll get another loan and they'll use that for something else, because most loans, when you look at kind of for premises, and look, if we talk about football teams, we'll probably look at it for stadiums, for example. So when Tottenham go and get money from the bank, they probably would pay that off over a 10 or 15 year period.
Well, look at Arsenal, Ciaran. They paid off their stadium. That's why Wenger was essentially keeping them afloat and getting that Champions League money in. That's why it was so important, because they couldn't spend any money because all the money was going to loan, and that was understandable. You know, they were paying off for us.
New stadium.
Yeah. Not what we're doing now. We're still struggling 15, 16 years down the line because of how they bought us.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's the problem. And if people can't understand that as fans, then I don't know how more simple terms you have to see that. I really don't. If you can't see the problem with that, then you're just as bad as what they're doing, really.
This is what I mean. At what point does this become a worry for the Premier League? Because, like I say, we're talking Manchester United, definitely Arsenal, 2 clubs there. You know, there's no hiding. Liverpool at the moment, everything's rosy in the garden. There's no problem there. But there are signs for me with Liverpool. Just the way, you know, when you look at the way that things are going from a business point of view, it could happen to them. They're not seeing it at the moment, probably like we were probably seeing it in 2008 where we were nearly winning a treble, but it will come clear one day, because what they're wanting to achieve at Owen in Liverpool is exactly what the Glazers are wanting to achieve at Owen in Manchester United.
Yeah, look, the one thing I'll say about quickly on the Liverpool is that, football success they've had over the last couple of years, but their finances haven't been as healthy as people make it out to be. There's a reason they didn't spend money last year, and there's probably a reason why they won't spend that money this year either. The one comment there that I kind of wanted to go to there, Haider, was about Oldham, where they're saying that a new Moroccan owner came in, he didn't pay the debt and it got worse. Well, the difference is Oldham is a small football club.
Yeah, United's self-sustaining.
Yeah, it's not self-sustaining, so that's the biggest difference. So, but what Joe mentions is a big problem for English football. We've seen so many teams already go into administration. It takes that first Premier League team for that to happen to. And that's when they probably take notice. That might be Newcastle, unless it gets sold eventually. But look, exactly what Jamie just said there, the majority of, I don't want to say for every single club, but the majority of clubs in England are in debt in some capacity. The reason why United is so widespread and why there's such a big topic on it is because they haven't attempted to pay it off in over 15 years. And that's the biggest issue. That they, like I said, they just keep letting it roll over. They pay the interest payments. That's all the bank needs. The bank just needs them to pay the interest payments every year. And then for them, it doesn't matter. They'll keep rolling it over. The reason is because the club is profitable. It's a problem, but it's something it's not going to change, because that's their business model now, that they don't mind the debt going. Because look, they know the club is valued at 4 billion. For 800 million, or it might go up, it might go down. It'll be around that point of when eventually they end up selling it. It's not going to be the biggest thing that's going to stop the club from being sold. The problem is, like I said, they're not going to sell. The last kind of point I wanted to make is because I've seen a lot of people talk about it. You mentioned, Haider, about the likes of when Tampa Bay spend money and how that's taking out of Manchester United. It's not. Completely different budgets are completely different, and the majority of the money spent for Tampa Bay comes from the NFL. The NFL pays each club hundreds of millions every single year because they have one of the biggest TV deals in all of sports. So that's where most of that money comes from. So none of it actually comes from Manchester United. So, like, for example, the Glazers take money out of our club. They don't do that and then put it into another club. They don't. They take that out and they put it into their estate.
Yeah,
so if you
want
to blame the Glazers for taking money out of the club and putting it into their own, fine. But you shouldn't comment on things that happen in Tampa Bay and say, this is coming from Manchester United. It's not. It's coming from the NFL. That's where they get the money from. Like, there's a reason why every single NFL team spends loads of money, because they get loads of money from the NFL, and there's a salary cap. So they know how much that they can spend. It's not the same as when we talk about European football, where the clubs that just have the most amount of money can spend the most amount of money. That's not the way it works in American sports, in the majority of them anyway. I know NBA and football over there, there's a salary cap, but there's not in baseball. But we need to kind of get out of that. So, like, for example, I saw so many people attacking whoever runs the Tampa Bay Buccaneers page because Tom Brady signed an extension, which meant he actually earned less per year, but it's just on a longer term deal. But nothing, that doesn't affect Manchester United. Manchester United signing players last season, like, we all kind of go crazy at it because we didn't sign them, but like, we've signed players from Manchester United for millions and millions and millions in the same season that Tampa Bay spends millions and millions and millions, because both clubs,
they're not linked.
Money. There's absolutely no link to it. The only issue is they both have the same terrible owners. There's a reason why Tampa Bay have won once in 23 or 24 years, because the owners aren't really that good, and they didn't have people making the right decisions for a long time. They changed it over the past 6 or 7 years, and they started to see an uptick in some of the things that are happening. So hopefully we've seen a change in the transfer strategy here, where we've seen new people come in. We've seen Solskjaer be brought in and be kind of head of this kind of recruitment inner circle. We've seen a director of football, technical director. So all you can hope is the decision-making there is good enough to where what the Glazers do financially in terms of taking money out of the club doesn't affect us as much on the football pitch as for a lot of other clubs it would. And it's very grim going through a lot of this, because the one stat that I think everybody needs to know is, since the Glazers have come in, £1 billion has been taken out of the club.
Ciaran, I want to actually address that now. And I'll come to you for this first on this point, and then I'll actually go through each of the transfers, how much you spent each summer, and how much came in. I think that's the best way to do it. Look, guys, I'm sorry if this is a bit of a depressing podcast. We just felt like we needed to talk about it. We've been putting it off for a while, and I think it's important that all the figures are out there. We're discussing them. We're debunking some of the stuff that isn't true. Like, for example, I've got a comment here. Fake recruitment circle. We don't know that yet. It's just look, I understand people are angry, but we don't know. They haven't even been in the job a week, so we can't really say. And that's why we're going to talk about transfers, because 1.2 billion or so, maybe it's about 1.3 billion now, since Sir Alex Ferguson left, has been spent. That money is Manchester United's money. Okay, before anyone thinks that they've done it themselves. And I see people defending the Glazers about this. And it just boggles my mind, because this has got absolutely nothing to do with the Glazers at all. They haven't put a single penny of their money in. They don't deserve credit. They should actually deserve criticism, because that money was spent so badly because they had people like Ed Woodward in charge, or they gave the managers, either they didn't give the managers their first choices. And by the way, people complaining about Ollie, this has been going on since LVG. He wanted Mane. He didn't get Mane. Look what happened to Mane. There's other players that he wanted. I think he wanted Thomas Muller. He wanted Ramos. All these players. Yeah, Pedro was one of them. He went to Chelsea, and obviously they won a title. With what's his name, Antonio Conte. So, look, it's important to differentiate from the emotion and the actual hard, cold facts, because then you can actually build a proper view of what's going on. So 1.2 billion has been spent. The Glazers deserve so much criticism for installing someone like Ed Woodward to run it. Okay, That is the biggest thing. The second thing that they've done as well, Ciaran, is that they were the ones. Joel Glazer was the one signing off. As you said at the beginning, he's the one that saw value. That's like me walking in. I'm not in the finance industry. I'm in tech, but that's like me walking in and becoming the CFO of a big finance company and signing off on which stocks and shares should be bought. It's absolutely mental, but that's the reality of it. And it's just crazy because the director of football actually would have saved them money. You probably would have had to spend maybe 700 million and it would have been spent better. So before people go in and have a go at Fletcher and Murto and people like that, let's just like wait. Okay. We might not spend a lot this summer. I've got people asking, are we going to sign Sancho and Haaland? Mate, I have about as much knowledge as other people. Well, from what I have heard and spoken to, and things that Rob's has said as well, because obviously Rob's got connections. I don't think we're going to sign Haaland. He thinks there's a chance. I think there's zero chance because we have a non-existent relationship with Raiola. That's a fact. That is an absolute fact. He wants to get Paul Pogba out as soon as possible. And I think the issue is as well is that money will be tight. And COVID has to be taken into account for that. I'm not making excuses for Glazers, but when we run through the figures, you'll understand why. So, Ciaran, 1.2 billion has been spent. So that summer that we bought Bruno came in January, but that year we bought Bruno, Maguire, Wan-Bissaka, and Dan James. Now, when other clubs sell to United, we usually spread those payments over 3 to 4 years. The biggest problem with United is they paid a lot of that money up front, and then the pandemic hit. So you can imagine they had 300 million sitting in the bank. Pretty much nearly all of that got wiped out before, and then the pandemic hit. So what happened was Leicester wanted nearly all the money up front. United paid pretty much nearly 80 million up front. Again, that's bad business. That's how desperate United were, and Leicester took advantage. I'm not saying Maguire's a bad player. That's for another time. That sort of discussion. But the fact that United paid that much money up front, Ciaran, is mad. Then you look at the Wan-Bissaka signing. 2 installments, 22.5 million up front, and the rest was last year. United are struggling to pay that one from last year. So you've got to think about that. That's nearly 110 million. No, more than that, sorry. 130 million that's gone out just on 2 players. Then the pandemic hits. Then you've got the Lukaku deal. Now, this is another problem with Manchester United. This is a legacy problem. The way that they've sold players. So you look at it. Lukaku, United were desperate to get him out. He was desperate to get out. Yeah, as Gerard says in the comments, bang on, mate. Inter still haven't paid us fully for him. So we gave them reasonable credit terms. So they're spreading over, I think it's 5 or 6 years. So that's 10 million a year. And United are forking out 80 million in one go on Maguire. Then you wipe out the 110 million from the wage bill. You've got a cash flow problem. And then you're looking at it now, Ciaran, as well. Sanchez, Di Maria, Depay, Mkhitaryan, Schneiderlin. We bought them all and sold them less for what we got them for. So looking at all of this, these legacy issues are hitting United now. And then the pandemic on top of it, there's just not that much money to spend. That's not me trying to cover for them. That's just cold, hard facts. I mean, there's a comment here from Chris saying Inter still owe us 43 million. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. Cheers, Aaron. Thank you. Thank you for support. Thanks, guys. Look, smash the like button as well. Please give us a subscribe as well if you're enjoying this. And thank you for all your input as well. So when you're looking at this, Ciaran, it's really grim reading, isn't it?
Yeah, because I don't worry too much. And there's a comment there where it's about how we still owe money from transfer fees, but that's normal because most transfer fees are over years. It's usually over kind of the lifetime of a contract that you end up giving a player. So that's why you see most transfer fees are probably paid in full over 4 to 5 seasons. And we don't hear about it because COVID is one reason why we hear about it, especially the Inter Milan one. If COVID didn't happen, I guarantee you we would never know how much Inter have paid already because it would have been one of those that they just would have eventually paid it. The biggest issue is the Harry Maguire one. I know you said it's pretty much almost all up front. I'm pretty sure it was all up front, and that's one of the biggest things. It's one thing United normally wouldn't do. And this comes back to the decision making or the planning that happened. That again, it comes to I don't believe Solskjaer got exactly who he wanted. I can't remember who it was that season, but that was done so late in the window that United had no choice.
The Maguire, you're talking about the Maguire transfer?
Yeah, the Maguire transfer. That it was done so late in the window that they had to just pay that because there was literally, I think, a week left, and they weren't going to be able to sign a top centre back if they didn't do that. Look, the Aaron Wan-Bissaka one made, at the time when I was looking at it, made sense. He played excellent. He was one of the players, one of the best defenders in the league, and he was one of the up and coming right backs. But then you look at it now, and we're thinking there's not enough attacking talent there. And the problem is if you've bought someone for that amount of money that you're still paying for, and then suddenly you need another right back, that's when the problems happen. We talk about our centre backs and how badly we need another centre back. When you spend 80 million on a centre back, you shouldn't need another centre back a year or two later,
or another right back when you spend 50 million. I mean, look,
yeah, it'd be the equivalent of if Bruno wasn't doing well, and then suddenly we're like, oh well, we need another attacking midfielder. That's the problem at this club. It's one that for so many years, when we would spend money and we'd spend it on players, we can look at Falcao, Di Maria, Memphis. Memphis is the worst one by a mile because he's going to get sold by Lyon for about 60 or 70 million to whatever it is, Barcelona. I know they wanted him. So you lose out on money there as well. But it's one of those that the investment was poorly done over a 7 to 8 year period. And then when we buy players, we don't get the right players, so we have to kind of fix that problem a year or two later. And then there's other times that when we sell players, unfortunately for Manchester United, when we sell players, it's because a player hasn't worked. When that happens, you don't get a high transfer fee. Number one, because their wages are too high, and number two, because they failed at the club. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, that's what happens at United. If United are going to sell them, it's one, they're desperate to leave, like Lukaku, Di Maria, or two, they've been so poor, nobody wants them, or they ended their career, and you've got everything you can out of them.
Yeah, that's the problem, and it's the last person that we sold for a good fee was Ronaldo, because you look at Lukaku and people say it's a good fee, but look, he was brought in initially to be the striker for the next 10 years, and it didn't work out. And then we see the other issue that we have in recruitment is that we take so long to actually fix positions. Like, when's the last time we had a right winger that actually was good for the club? We speak about kind of after Cristiano Ronaldo and after Nani, who else did we have? Antonio Valencia. Then after that, who is there? There's nobody. And there's the problem is the recruitment over time was bad because there was bad people making decisions. And the problem was Ed Woodward was heading up that department for so long and he didn't really know what he was doing. But the problem was there was nobody else there. And that's the issue. Loads of the scouts were gone. There wasn't a big recruitment department at Manchester United when Ferguson left. So there was actually no other choice but Ed Woodward to take it over when he had absolutely no experience in doing so. So bad decision making with bad timing meant we made a lot of terrible deals. And unfortunately, we've suffered with the consequences of that over probably the past 5 seasons.
Yeah, spot on. Guys, I don't want to make this about bashing Maguire as well, because that's not what it's about. Like, at the end of the day, every man and their dog knows we overpaid for him. He knows he's not worth 80 million as well. And I think ultimately, at the end of the day, he wasn't my choice as a centre-back. Has he improved United? Yes. Do you expect more when you pay 80 million? Yes. But, you know, he doesn't pick his price tag, and that's on United, because they could have got him cheaper a season before if they'd actually spent the money that Jose wanted on him for 60 million. Again, he wouldn't have been my choice as a centre back. But let's not bash him about it, because it's not on him. Joe, I'm going to come to you. You've been sitting there very patiently in the corner.
Interesting to hear what you guys have got to say. I mean, like I say, you guys have got a better grasp on things like this, and it's enlightening even to fans like me who think we have a pretty good handle on it. But I've learned a lot tonight, so it's been good. That's
great, and I hope everyone else has as well. And you always do provide a great insight as well, Joe. Don't worry. There's a good comment here actually from JL. We knew contracts with average players. We offer them massive wages, more than what's deserved. Then we struggle to sell them. So, like, one of my analogies or examples is that. So we gave Phil Jones a 4-year contract. He's on about 4 million a year. It's actually something I spoke to Paulie about maybe 2-3 months ago. It's cheaper to renew his contract and pay him what, 16 million over 4 years, than to go and spend 50 million on Upamecano's fee, then pay his agent, then pay any signing on bonuses, then give him a salary. Then you're looking at an 80 to 100 million pound package over 5 years. They are businessmen, and that's what they do. It's just cheaper, and that's the reality. So when people say this as well, here's another one: Ollie's clearing the dead wood. I'm 100% sure that Ollie's said to the owners, I don't want this player, I don't want that player. But the thing is, at the end of the day, his word is all it is. He's not deciding who gets new contracts. People are having a go at Ollie because Phil Jones. And by the way, I'm not the biggest Ollie fan. Everyone knows this here who listens to it regularly. It doesn't mean I want him out or anything, by the way. I'm not as convinced. Kieran's another one. He's not as convinced. Joe's obviously a little bit more. But for people to hit Ollie with the stick that, oh, he gave Phil Jones a new contract, and I've seen people saying this, he gave this player and that player. It's not on him at all, because ultimately he's not the one in charge of the purse strings. People saying Ollie's a Glazer puppet. I wouldn't go that far. I think that's harsh. What I will say about Ollie, though, Joe, what frustrates me is there have been times where he does. You don't have to stick the boot in like Jose Mourinho and pretty much go full breakdown. You don't have to protect them. There's a way of saying things. And I think sometimes, when he does cover for them, ultimately, if he doesn't get back this summer, which is a very, very big possibility, and sorry to be a Debbie Downer, but if he doesn't get back this summer, Joe, ultimately, who's going to have the knife in his back? It's going to be Ollie. And who's going to be stabbing him? It's going to be Glazer. It's going to be Woodward.
Yeah, and this is why I think people have an issue with this new contract, because we've been here before, haven't we? Like you said, with Jose, I think you tweeted about that the other day, about learning from your mistakes. You would think, though, that I think Rob talked about it on the Masterclass about changes in severance payment if certain targets aren't hit. But I think Ollie's got to be stronger with the Glazers. I think if he goes into the negotiations in the summer, well, he's already been in negotiation, but if he goes to sign a contract in the summer, say we finish second and we win a trophy, he's got to take that as a position of strength in with him. And he's got to demand some promises from those guys as well. He's got to say, look, I don't want to go down the same path as previous managers have. Can you assure me that you're going to get me X, Y, and Z? Can you assure me that you're going to make these improvements to the club in order for me to do my job properly? If they don't, then Ollie's got to be clever about how he does this, because I don't think he's bothered about having another sack into his name, because this is his job anyway. This is a pinnacle for him. But he wants to go out knowing that it wasn't on him, if you know what I mean. And you want that to come across. And I think every manager's the same. Jose spent 6 months after the summer transfer basically saying, if this goes wrong, it's not on me, guys. It's on the board. He spent 6 months banging that drum. But I think the point that you made there about contracts is a really good one. And I think that it's one of the reasons why United fans will be left frustrated again this summer in the transfer market. Because the problem is now is the Glazers are looking at these big marquee signings that fans want to sign, the likes of Haaland and Sancho. And they're looking at it and thinking, where's the value on this? Because they're going to sign Haaland for over 100 million. He's going to be there for 2-3 seasons. That's all he's probably going to be there for.
Client. We spoke about
Rioola's going to want to move him on. Therefore, can they generate enough from the money that he brings in off the pitch with all the marketing and sponsoring over a 2-3 year period? Do they make their money back on that signing? And the problem is they know that by signing a new player, they're forking out a lot more than what they are by renewing the contract of a player that they already have at the club. And I think we've talked about it on the show before. We did an academy pod a few weeks ago with Alan, me and Ciaran. Check it out if you haven't seen it. I think this is another reason why United have made such a conscious effort to improve their academy over the last couple of years, because they're trying to create products that they can use and be successful that way. Not only products that they may be able to sell on for more money in the future, but products that if they're good enough to play in the first team, it's going to be a lot cheaper for them to renew their contracts and keep them here longer term than it is to bring a superstar like Haaland and Sancho, who's only going to be here for 2 or 3 years. More and more players nowadays, and I don't blame them for them, want to experience different leagues. They want to experience different cultures. They want to say they've won a title in 3 or 4 different countries, and I don't blame individual players for that. But as a business model, that don't work for the Glazers. When they're looking at Manchester United and making money, it doesn't work for them to have a player that only sees the club as a stepping stone or just another part of his journey. So this is why, they are signing average players on longer contracts, and they're making a more concerted effort to bring youth through.
But this is my biggest problem, and this is why when there's a lot of people saying Ollie's doing this rebuild, amazing job, open your eyes. They're replacing them with the academy players, and look, that is one of the one positives, Ciaran. I want to say, I know you've got a lot of in-depth knowledge on the academy, and guys, definitely check out the academy one. We'll do one actually over the international break as well. We've got Alan Brennan, he's fantastic, he's got great insight. Ciaran and Joe will be doing that show. Joe will host it, so definitely smash the subscribe button if you are enjoying what you're watching. Look, I think there's a general consensus. It seems to be quite a lot against Ollie. Look, I've said it before, I'm not Ollie's biggest fan, I really am not, but that's not really for with all due respect, I'm not gonna look back at what happened in 2005 when he was against the Glazer ownership. For me, that is an issue, but I don't want to go into that because we're entering, a conversation which is probably just not even. There's no point having it. At the end of the day, he's Manchester United manager now. What I will say though is that, and it's a comment here from Gerard. Actually, the issue is that Ollie said he's happy. He was happy last year with the squad, and if you do that, you own the flag. That's spot on, and that's what I want to say. There's a way of saying, the squad's not strong enough or you need more without actually saying what Jose did. These players are awful or whatever Jose said. He went on to full defensive mode. He was damage limitations. He knew he was going. He knew he was getting his 20 million or 30 million payoff. Ciaran, thanks, guys. Thank you, Jay, for the comments, honestly. I hope you guys have enjoyed this conversation because I don't want it to be filled with just complete emotions because we all can't stand the Glazers, but we just need to look at it a little bit more clearly and break it down properly because I think there are so many facets to this. It's not just about transfer, it's not just about debt. There's so many different things about it. But Ciaran, that's the thing, isn't it? People talk about the way that the way that Ollie's got rid of Deadwood, let's say. I'm not convinced that that's really what's happening. I think, yes, they've got players out the door, but I'm not really attributing it as much to him. And I'm not going to praise him as much as other people will because of the fact that what's going to happen is we saw that Romelu Lukaku went out. I know Martial got shifted centrally, but it was Mason Greenwood. And Mason Greenwood is a fantastic talent. United shouldn't have been relying for the past 2 seasons. We got into top 4 because Mason hit great form and United played some fantastic football. We've seen this season what's happened. You take Mason's goals out, and he's 19. The kid's 19. We shouldn't be saying, and Amad Diallo is a fantastic talent. Another one, someone I'm so excited to see, and I want him to go and be that right winger for Man United. But inevitably, look, the pressure's so high on this kid. Mejbri, the pressure on Mejbri. He's just signed his new contract. Alanga as well. Not as much pressure, but the pressure on these kids. Back in the day under Sir Alex, you had a dressing room of, Kino, you had Rio, Vidic, you had, all these players, you had Scholesy, Giggs. They were coming into an absolutely top, world-class winning dressing room. So when Wayne Rooney came in, when Ronaldo came in, they weren't the ones having to carry United. They were having to fit and go and assimilate to that winning culture. These kids are coming in, and you're looking at us and you're thinking, we have a bit of a problem at right wing. Oh my God, Diallo is going to be the one that's going to have to step up. That's not fair. And this is where the mismanagement comes in. So that's where my anger is towards the Glazers, that we're even at this situation. I mean, some people say that we're buying these young players so we can sell them for big profits later on, a sort of Dortmund model. I mean, where do you sit on that, Ciaran?
It's tough. I give Solskjaer some credit in the fact that we saw Moyes, Van Gaal, and Mourinho, and we were seeing the same players continuously make the same mistakes and not be held accountable. And look, Solskjaer did get rid of quite a lot of players when we look at it, but there's still a lot to do, and that just shows you how bad shape the club we're in. And I completely agree that before, when players came through, whether we bought them, whether it was Cristiano Ronaldo, whether it was Wayne Rooney, and there's plenty of others that you can talk about, even to a smaller extent when we look at Nani, that there was players here that were in place that you didn't have to worry that they were just coming into the squad. The problem is the players that are currently coming through now. So we look at even Greenwood, for example. We look at Hannibal Mejbri. We look at Amad Diallo. You look at even Facundo Pellistri as well. The problem is those players should have been coming in with players that were recruited in 2013 or 2014. And that's what should have been happening. So if we bought properly for that 3 or 4 year period right after Sir Alex, these players would be coming in with established players. You look at all the players that we were linked with that nearly happened, which I hate talking about, but there was the likes of the Tony Cruises and those style, where they would have been those established, Fabregas, and there was a lot more. Even Thiago was one. But those established players were the plan to bring in, but didn't work because we didn't bring them in. And then it would have been easier to kind of bring those players through. Like, think of some of the players we could have brought in early on in that. And then let's say then you see Rashford come in and kind of be part of that rather than have to be the focal point. You see Greenwood come in, you see Meshbury come in, you see some of these new kind of exciting young players come in. They should add to it. They shouldn't have to be the focal point. Like, that's the biggest problem, is the only signing that I think that we've made that makes a hell of a lot of sense in the last 5 or 6 years is Bruno Fernandes. And the problem is, unless you get 4 or 5 signings like that, you're not going to have a base of a team. The problem is we operate very similarly in terms of our managers to the way Chelsea did early on in the 2000s. The difference was Chelsea had that base of players. They brought in the right players. So within a 3-year period, they had brought in Cech. They had brought in, I know Terry and Lampard were there already, but they brought in Drogba. But then when players left, they were just able to kind of substitute them in. So, for example, you had Robin and Duff for a while. Then suddenly you had Solomon Kalou that came in. You had Eden Hazard that came in. But it's when one person goes, another person comes in, because that base of that spine of the team is still there. With Manchester United, we had the same thing. While you had Scholes and Keane for a while, Keane leaves, Carrick comes in. When you lose some of your defenders, Rio Ferdinand comes in, Nemanja Vidic comes in. And the one position actually that we constantly changed was the striker, because you had the service behind. And also you can kind of say the right wing, because David Beckham went and then Cristiano Ronaldo came in. So it comes to that where you do need that base of a squad that's always going to be the same. They're your best players and they're not moving on. And personally, that's why I think it's very positive that in the last day or two that there's been talk of Bruno Fernandes getting a new deal, even though he only signed, because you actually want to lock him up long term. So if you're getting a new deal, you give him a deal for 6 years, and that's him sorted. And what they need to do now is they need to build on that. So they need to get in. I don't care whether it's a centre back, a right wing, a centre forward. You get somebody in that fits what you want to do long term. That the one thing I really liked from Gary Neville, that I can't remember what year, it might have been this year even, they said no manager should ever come in and have their style. It should be Manchester United style, so that when whoever comes in, you play the same style every single time. Yeah. Players you bring in fit the club style. You see it with Bayern Munich, that managers have changed very often there, but they play the same way. And the players they bring in fit their system.
From top to bottom, they're all playing the same football. And that's what used to happen in United, and it's not happening. Sorry, I do want to add to that. Sorry, Ciaran. I know you're absolutely spawned, but what I wanted to add to that as well is that that's where the director of football should be very key in this. And that's why I was happy to see that we've addressed that position. I don't want to talk about whether they're yes men, because if you think that, go back and watch our last one. We actually broke down Moto and Fletcher, and we went into so much depth. So before making and passing that judgment, just because they're inside hires, the best thing to do is to go and listen to that podcast, guys. That's episode 24, Ciaran. But the thing is, as well, is that that is the thing. There's been no continuity, and when we go through the transfers, and I'll go to Joe for that. I'll let you finish your point. But the fact that there's been no continuity means that you have a mishmash of players, right? You've got Sir Alex's players, and you've got Moyes. I mean, he wasn't there long enough. He only bought Fellaini and Mata. But then you had LVG, possession-based football. And then you went straight to the complete other extreme of the spectrum, and you had Jose Mourinho, where you were playing football. I mean, I thought Jose would win the league at Man United. I really did. Yeah. And you know what? You probably have to question. It would have been boring, but you probably question if he'd got the players that he really wanted, he might have done that, because that's what Jose does. I think he's finished now. And then you bring in Oli. it's so important that whoever comes in after, and I have said for a long time that he's A to B, right? He'll take you from A to B. He'll stop the rot. He'll put the platform in place. He'll set the squad up for someone who can win trophies, because that B to C, and I always say this, and people don't like it, but that's just my opinion. I think that's where we're gonna. You might see the squad maybe really showing what it can do, maybe with the next manager. That's just my opinion, but the issue is that for so many years we haven't had that continuity. Have we? We haven't played what's United DNA football. We haven't played that in the last 7 years.
No, that's the problem. Is you need to have that DNA, and this is where I do give Ollie credit. Well, I might not. I think I'm fairly in the middle on Ollie. That I know that he's done better than the managers after Ferguson, but there's still another level to go to. Where I feel bad for him is he's actually had to build that. And that shouldn't be the case. That should already be ingrained at a football club. But the problem is once Ferguson left, they went away from that. And that was the biggest mistake that the club made, is that when Moyes came through, when Van Gaal came in, when Mourinho came in, granted there should have been different managers based on the style, but they should have been told these are the style of players that we recruit at Manchester United, whether it's for the first team, for the under-23s, for the under-18s. It's the first time United are actually doing that in probably 10 years. They didn't even do it under Ferguson. You look at some of the players that were brought into the youth ranks, and it didn't have anything in relation to what was being brought in the first team. Hence the reason you actually didn't see many players get brought through. Or when they did under Louis van Gaal, most of them got sold afterwards. Like, the only one that made it was Marcus Rashford. I know there was Scott McTominay that made it under Mourinho, but again, that was kind of a freak. The fact that
it's because he's a unit. That's why. It's the only reason why Jose.
Yeah, it's that. But like,
he does his talent.
Yeah, but his whole time in the youth ranks up until probably the year before he got promoted, he was 5'7", 5'8", and then he just grew into the player over I think it was like a summer or a year, and that's what brought Mourinho to bring him in. But the problem is now when you actually look at the recruitment model of the players being brought in, it's very similar to the style of players we want to bring into the first team. So you look at even some of the strikers that we brought in. So we always talk about Joe Hugo from Sunderland. The way he plays is very similar in the way that you see the style of strikers that Ollie wants in terms of like Haaland and stuff, that it's just someone that gets in the right positions and scores. But we weren't doing that beforehand. We were getting a mixed match of players in the youth system and also in the first team. It just didn't work. And it goes to the whole thing of the styles of managers you bring in. You go from Alex Ferguson to David Moyes. Okay, it's not, in terms of style, it's not a huge difference because they both, the way they want to play when Moyes was at Everton was similar. But then you go to Louis van Gaal, like you said, it's a possession-based system where really you're not there to kind of dominate the opponent in terms of shots on target or anything like that. It's about keeping possession, and the longer you have possession, the less likely you're going to lose. Very similar to what Pep said before the United game, that we're going to try and beat United by keeping possession. That's what Van Gaal did. Mourinho was the complete opposite. And he's like, we don't want to make mistakes. So we defend, and then we try and get the one or two chances that are quality, and we try and score from there. And then we go to Ollie, who it was all about trying to bring it back to where we were before Moyes, which we're seeing kind of his ideas, but the players that we have don't really fit what he wants to do either. And that's the problem. So when you move on from Ollie, which will eventually happen, you have to get someone that is ingrained to the way the club wants to play.
Yeah,
that's why we honestly, we only mentioned the likes of Poch and we mentioned Nagelsmann because they're the style of managers. It can be someone that we haven't really heard of on the biggest stage.
Marco Rose is one of them.
Yeah, plays that way, and I would accept it because I'm like, okay,
Potter plays great football, attacking football.
Because then the decision makes sense. But I don't want to see us go after like a high-profile manager that does the complete opposite, because that's not what you want. Because then you go back on what Ollie has tried to fix at the club over the last couple of years, and then if you do that, then you really have squandered the last couple of years. And that's the biggest problem at the club, is that decision making. And look, we're going to discuss it now with the transfers, and I think that kind of encapsulates
everything that has been going wrong at the club since Ferguson's left.
Fantastic points, and I think that's really encapsulates Ollie's time at United so far, and that's why I will never put down what the hard work he's done and what he has actually had to do, because he did. We've said on previous podcasts, Ciaran said many times, Mason Green wanted to go. There was no way into the first team for these academy players, and when Jose was here, it was a very, very dark and dreary place. I mean, when I had Jamie Jackson on and we spoke about it, obviously he's he wrote Ollie's autobiography, but you talk to people around the club and they were saying under Jose Mourinho, it was just Jesse Marsh is a great shout, Krish. Definitely, he's a fantastic manager. There's some great managers, young managers out there, and that's what United have to do. I agree. We don't want to go and get Simeone, or and that's the thing. Ollie stopped the rot. Now, I think I don't want to make this about Ollie, really, but last point I will make, Joe, will come to you on thing, is that I think sometimes you have to understand how important certain managers are at certain times in the club's history, and it was very, very important that someone came in. Jamie, obviously you're not very happy in the comments. Have a Snickers or something, mate. You need to chill out. Have something to eat. But what I will say is that I think that it was important for him to come in and stop the rot, because it was bad. It was really bad. I don't think fans maybe even realize how bad it is until you speak to certain people that are well connected and they know exactly what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Ole Gunnar Solskjaer came in. Is he perfect? No. Is he the best tactician? No. Are the players happier under him? Yes. Are they playing for him? Yes. Is this the best United have been? 7-8 years? Yes. Do they need to win a trophy? Yes. And if that's how you're going to judge it, then yes, he's not as successful as Jose Mourinho or Louis van Gaal. But are you not in a better position than the day that he walked in? 100% yes. He's leaving the club. He will leave the club in better hands. You're allowed to turn around and say, I have doubts about his title credentials. You're allowed to say that I don't see this free-flowing attacking football that so many people claim to see, because it's not like that. Our last 2 or 3 months or 2 months, even the City game. Look, City I enjoyed that because we pressed them and we won, but we're not free-flowing. And that's got to do with some of the players, but it's also got to do with a lot of... it has to also do with some of the coaching staff. Does he need someone more experienced in there who's going to help? Cohen he stopped the rot. That's the term I always use, stop the rot, and that's what it was. United was rotten to the core. Is it better now than when Ollie, than before Ollie came? Yeah, of course it is. Is it perfect? No, the Glazers are still an issue. But I just think that Jamie had a Kit Kat. Good shout. That always does help. Look, thank you guys for all your comments. It's been great. As Alan says here, Joe, I'm going to pose this to you. But Ollie took over a 6th place dysfunctional team, ended the dysfunction his first half season, improved to 3rd last year, has him 2nd while closing the gap to 1st. If the progress stalls, then it might be time to change. Yeah, that's a very fair comment. Look, we're going to talk about the transfers before we wrap up. I know we've gone for an hour and a half, guys. Thank you for staying with us, by the way. I hope we haven't bored you too much, or you haven't enjoyed it. But look, Joe, let's talk about some of the transfers. Now, I'm going to go through.
Let's not.
I'm going to go through them. I'm going to read out this comment quickly. My good friend Best and Cantona, because I do always enjoy your tweets. I know we do have a good bit of banter on Twitter. Trouble is, so many fans are polarized. Ollie in and Ollie out. It's toxic. Absolutely. Cheers, Jamie. Thank you for your comments. Enjoy that Kit Kat, mate. I'm going to have one after we finish this show. I think I deserve it. I agree with that. Ollie in and Ollie out. And I actually said to these boys, and these boys, I've never met these guys. We've started podcasting last summer, and we just enjoyed doing podcasting. And I thought, just come along and join me on my podcast here. But I always say to them, it's as if Ollie in and Ollie out has become the topic each week. And I shared a view yesterday, and I said, I have fears he's hit a ceiling, or 2 days ago, and I got abused for it, properly abused. Some of the stuff that I got, I mean, my block button was definitely used sparingly, but this is a problem, that you can have a view about Ollie being the manager that you think is going to win titles for Man United. That is completely fine. But if someone has a different view and they're not abusive and they're expressing why and they've given reasons why, don't abuse them and call them plastic. No. And conversely, if someone really does think that Ollie can win titles and you think he's a PE teacher or whatever, let them just have a healthy conversation and disagree. There's many people that I do that with. You know, and have healthy conversations. And we completely disagree on Manchester United. Another thing, Alan's talking about Poch. That's why I got abused, because of Poch. And I think that's another issue. Sancho didn't join in the summer. United fans started abusing Sancho. It's ridiculous. Poch hasn't done anything to United. He's getting abused. I get abused for saying that I like Pochettino. I like Nagelsmann. I'm a football fan. And people don't like this, but, you know, I do look jealously at Liverpool last season and City because they played great football. Like, that doesn't mean that I support Liverpool or City. You know, that doesn't mean that it's shocking to, you know, to be a United fan and say that. I hate them just as much, but, you know, they play great football and it's okay to say that. I mean, look, United against Glazers saying here, Ollie, you know, people can't differentiate between the player and the manager. I think that's true at times. I do think that's true. Not everyone's like that. There are a lot of people that saw the graphic yesterday on Sky Sports where Ollie's got a great goal and assist per minute record. He's up there with the best. And I think a lot of people, you know, oh, my manager. Well, mate, that was him as a player. It doesn't really have anything to do with him as a manager. But he'll always be a legend. And anyone that also says that he's not a legend is just an idiot, quite frankly. But, Jay, I'm going to read out your comment here. But out of Ollie, Jose, Van Gaal, who do you think would have been the best suited to replace Fergie, take into account what they did and are doing during their final time at the club? I thought Jose would have been good straight after Fergie, if I'm being honest with you.
Those players, they're
none of them for me, but carry on, yeah.
For me, it should have been either Pep, Ancelotti, or Klopp. I wanted Klopp. I'm going to read out Helly's comment here. I don't think Ollie cares whether he's in or out in people's minds. He'll get on with it regardless. We should support the squad. Yeah, I agree with that. I think, look, healthy debate's important as well. You can't go blind, can you, Joe? You can't look at it and think he can do no wrong, because invariably over the last 2 months, look, up until where we were top of the table, you cannot fault what was going on. Yeah. But that was 6 weeks ago. Now we're 6 weeks here now, and you're allowed to critique. And I think that's important. It's healthy. Go on, mate.
No, of course you are. Sorry, I thought you'd finished. You know, that's a really good point. I think nobody should have an opinion that's set in stone, because if you do, then, you know, you're going to be wrong at some point. The thing is wherever you stand on this, you're always going to be either right at some point and wrong at some other point. You're just going to have to take your medicine on that. You know what I mean? But I think it's important to acknowledge that you have to understand the football world these days as well. So all these people that are Ollie in and think that he's a saviour and he's gonna, you know, he's gonna do everything, he won't be here long enough to do that. You know what I mean? I think even if, you know, he wins a couple of trophies, football will move on. You know, there'll be something, and he will have to go. We've seen managers win big trophies at clubs before, and they still move on. You know what I mean? Ranieri won a league at Leicester City and was gone the year after. You know, we've seen it with Chelsea with Ancelotti, won a double, and then he went the year after. You know, even success these days doesn't sort of guarantee your job. But, you know, it's a shame that sort of Twitter and social media has become this place where people can't express their opinion and cannot. That's
how I feel at the moment. I will be taking a step back. I mean, Rana, you're asking me, can any manager in world football make us any higher than we are in the table? I mean, look, I think higher than first. Look, if you give Pep the squad, he probably can't play what he wants to play. But United would probably be closer under other managers. We wouldn't be as far behind. I think that's fair to say. Whether he would be higher, like, we don't know. We can't say. But I think, you know, the fact that people say no one else can do better, Joe, is silly. And also, guys, look, some people are going to be Ollie in, not Ollie in, but some people will like Ollie, some people won't. Like, that's fine. Let's not attack each other in the comments. Not that you are saying it before.
Look, at the end,
would City be where they are without Pep? That's the other thing.
Not that far ahead.
Yeah, so like that's the thing. We always say styles make matches. They use it with kind of fights, and it's the same thing for football. Is that if you have a squad that matches the style of the manager, it works, and if you don't, you kind of get inconsistent performances, and that's where we're at the moment.
Problem is, though, Haider, you just get this vicious circle, because what you get is with fans. What we've got now, we've got the hangover, so to speak, from when Jose left. So when Jose left, there was still Jose in. There was people who were Jose in, Jose out. those Jose in people have almost become Ollie out people, and it's put a stain on Ollie's
it's really bad, yeah.
And this is going to be the next problem when the next manager comes in, because all of the Ollie inners, and they're even more sort of frivolous because he's a club legend. Yeah. Whoever comes in next is going to have to convince those Ollie inners first and foremost. And what you just get is this revolving vicious circle that never ends until you get a coach and a manager that can unite a fan base. And if a manager out there can do that, I'd have him in tomorrow, because if there's anything I'd love to see, I'd love to just see this fan base come together on something. If we could come together about what we're seeing on the pitch and the football side, then you can come together and fight some of the topics that we've been talking about earlier in this show about the ownership. But you've got such a divided fan base. Everybody's got something to moan about at the moment, something to sort of critique. And again, Twitter every weekend is dominated by hashtag Ollie in or hashtag Ollie out. And Glazer out doesn't get a mention till June, July, August time. And this is the problem. If a fan base could unite on someone, on a manager or a style of play, then I think we could deal with some more of the pressing issues. But it's all just one big vicious circle, and you can't sort one without sorting the other. You know what I mean? I mean, like I said to you many times in the group chat, Haider, if I thought sacking Ollie tomorrow would solve all the problems at this club, would bring us doubles, trebles in 2 or 3 years to come, I would do it. I've got no sort of sentimental value on that side. My issue is if he goes, we just end up having the same problems on and off the pitch. We have the same division amongst fans, and we still have owners and a board and people even maybe involved in football negotiations like Woodward who cannot bring in the right players to bring us the success that we need. So it's depressing, but it's just this constant
vicious cycle.
Ends.
You make a great point because, for example, like us three, we get on so well, don't we? Myself and Ciaran have not clashed. We have healthy debates about Paul Pogba when he wanted to leave, you know, and I've been a staunch supporter of Paul Pogba because I just think that he's an easy scapegoat. And then myself and Joe, we haven't clashed, but we have strong debates about, you know, Ollie and Ollie, whether he's good enough or not. You know, and I think it's important. Look, you should be able to talk with people, and that's the problem. The initial reaction. I've now started. I started from yesterday, but now I turn my comments off to just people who follow me who can reply. I shouldn't have to do that, and I'm not someone that's. You can disagree with me, and a lot of people do disagree with me, and that's fine. I'm happy to have the debate with you, but the problem is when people get abusive, and that's wrong. I shouldn't have to turn mine off. And look, all of us three, we put our faces out there, and it gets difficult sometimes, and it's great to have people interacting in the comments that are genuinely like, you know, really really good opinions, sound opinions, different opinions, and like I'm happy to read everyone's comment out. I will challenge it, your comment, you can challenge me, that's completely fine. I think the issue is, I mean, Alan's saying here, I think the problem is the Ollie outers need to move the bar because the teams show progression. They can't be wrong. There's definite progression, 100%. But I also think the ones that think Ollie, who are so staunchly Ollie in, like they'll just beat you with any stick if you say, if it's constructive. And that's the problem. So that's what I've had to struggle with. I've had no issues with people that are like, love United, hate Glazers, you know, those idiots. Or I haven't had any issues with people. I'm not saying United against Glazers, they're all right. It's the other lot. I haven't had any issues with them. I haven't had any issues. I've had issues with people actually who are such staunch Ollie supporters that they're the ones who have been more abusive, and that's actually the thing that's sad, because you know what, they're the people that support the manager. You'd expect the ones that didn't and were really abusive about it, you can understand, but the ones that
like for me anyway, I wouldn't classify myself as Ollie in or Ollie out, because I find it real cringy when I read people saying that I'm Ollie in or I'm Ollie out, because really to me it's like I'm a Manchester United fan. I want what's best for the club. If it means Ollie right now being the manager is best for us going forward, then that's fine. If it means that whatever it is in 18 months when there's a lot of managers where their contracts are up that you can get improvements, well then if you need to make the change, well that's fine. I'm not devoted to a manager. Look, I'll never be devoted to a manager like I was to Alex Ferguson. What Joe mentioned earlier is completely right. When you want Ollie gone, Sir Alex Ferguson and a manager like him is not walking through that door. So the club have to be very sure before making those decisions. it goes to the point of he's going to get a contract extension, because right now there's actually not anybody out there that you look at that you're like, this is definitely going to help us in the long term. And that's what the club are going to see it as. Let's say if Poch still wasn't with PSG and he was available in the summer, personally, I think the club would probably have made a decision. But I think right now they're kind of at the point is they see kind of slow progress in terms of results. It's not exactly where the club want to be, but they see enough progress there that Ollie will get a new contract. So those that don't like him, unfortunately, you're just going to have to get used to it, because
it depends how long the contract is as well, Ciaran. You know, if it's an extra year,
I don't think it's going to be a long contract. I don't think it's going to be a long one.
I've said it before, is that he has one more year left after June, that I would extend it for 2 more seasons. And that gives you the opportunity that if something happens within those 3 years, it's not a huge contract that you can't get out of. People, and actually Paulie put this really good on Twitter, that Mourinho got a new contract and 6 months later, or 7-8 months later, was sacked. United, they're not at a point of, if they give a manager a contract, that they're going to stay faithful to that manager the whole time. Most likely, they're not. They'll give Ollie an extension. I don't think whatever contract he signs, I don't think he sees out the entirety of that contract. You'll probably see him as coach. I've always believed it for the next 12 to 18 months. And the only way that it wasn't going to happen is if we were 5th or 6th right now. I said it back in, when was it? October, November, when a lot of people were saying we were struggling, and if we lost to Everton that he'd get sacked. I was like, unless we are completely out of the Champions League race, there's no way that he's getting sacked. And that's the way it looks, and he's probably going to get a short-term extension. I would be annoyed and very shocked if he got a 4 or 5 year extension, because then it's the club not really being in touch with reality.
If things go badly. And what I do want to say quickly, I mean, guys, we'll finish up talking about the spending. Thank you again for all your comments. This is so true. Fans should be allowed to criticize aspects of game management without being abused.
Absolutely.
Obviously, myself and Best in Canton, we follow each other, and you're definitely one of those that's not abusive in any shape or form. I've seen you been getting abused just for example, getting frustrated that we start games slowly, or getting frustrated about the in-game management, things that are legitimate and you can have discussion about. And that's a big problem. And look, unfortunately, what's going to happen is we had this on the Jose Mourinho where some people really didn't like him. And the problem is, as Joe said, when Ollie does eventually go, not everyone's like this, by the way, I'm not grouping up. There will be some people that really, really liked Ollie as manager, and they will make it life a little bit more difficult for the next one. So look, there's a good point here from Glazers Out. I hope you like our little green and gold background and my little scarf. But as long as we're winning trophies and being dominant again, the fans will shut up and won't be as divided. We've seen glimpses of it when we went on a winning run. We weren't as divided. Absolutely. Comment here from Helly. I have a problem with people who will only accept being top of the table and winning the league. If that doesn't happen, then you no longer support the club. I think it's fair. I think what I will say, and this might be a little bit controversial, I do think standards have slipped. I think we have to accept where we are, but I think there's an acceptance. I said this on someone's podcast yesterday, and this is in no way defending Jose Mourinho. But when Jose came second against City, behind City, obviously that was a great City side, people were like, well, it doesn't matter, you were so far behind. But if we finish second with a similar or even more points, there will be some fans that will celebrate it. The same ones that said that was not acceptable. This is where I have an issue. Like, you've got to have fans. And that's why I don't have loyalties to any manager. People say support your manager. Great. We've had four managers now. Like, each time my faith just, like, my attachment went and went and went. And by the time it's come to this point, like, I don't have attachment to any manager. I just want to see Man United do it. As Ciaran said, we're Man United fans. We're not Ollie fans. We're not Jose fans. It's a new weird phenomenon with modern fans. And it's just very, very frustrating. Look, Jose had to go. Ollie's done the best out of any manager post Sir Alex. And you'll see that because he'll leave the club in a better position than when he came in. I don't think any other manager did that. I think Jose left it in a worse place than he came in. I think LVG might have left it better than Moyes, possibly, but it's difficult to say. Moyes wasn't there for that long. But I think that's the thing, we have to understand at the moment that we're not a title-winning side. We haven't got the players to do it. And I said when we were top of the table, and we said this on this podcast, City are going to win it. I said that. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be aiming. And the problem is, and that's why we've done this podcast, guys, we've got the Glazers in charge. And if you've just joined us, please, I know it's a long podcast, but go back to the beginning. We break down everything from start to finish from when they bought the club. And unfortunately, whichever manager it is, whether it's Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, whether it's a serial winner like Jose Mourinho, whether it's Nagelsmann that comes in after, whether it's Marco Rose, or anyone, whether it's Hassan Hutel, I'm just throwing out names. Please don't think I'm saying bring him in. I know he's had a bad run. But the problem is that when you've got owners like this who aren't going to go and buy everybody that you want in the summer that you need to fix the side, you have to be either a fantastic tactician and just be able to get, extract 100% from your players and your squad, or, and this is a big caveat, the rest of the league has to be poor that year, like Leicester when they won the league. That's the only way. And then that will only happen when Pep Guardiola leaves, realistically. So it's very difficult. I mean, Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just think, Haider, when you look at it, this board, it's just about results and where you finish in the table. If you look at the managers since Sir Alex Ferguson, and even Sir Alex Ferguson at times towards the end, no manager has ever been sacked because of their style of football. Every manager has been sacked when they failed to get this club into Europe where the money is, when they've failed to get themselves into the money position. So Jose Mourinho got us second, fantastic, where they wanted to be. He wasn't back that summer. They sacked him the next season because it didn't look like he was going to get into Europe. Louis van Gaal the same, he won the FA Cup, yeah, but United weren't going to be in Europe that year. David Moyes couldn't, as soon as that was impossible for him to get into Europe, they sacked him. Ciaran made a great point a few months ago on this show that if they are going to pull the plug on Ollie, it'll probably be when he mathematically can't get into Europe, if that was ever going to be a thing. And that's when they'll pull the plug. And that is the sad thing. It's never really been about style or attractive football or winning football. It's always been about football that gets us into the positions in the table that allow us to generate the money and the revenue. And unfortunately, you can blame the league system for this or football. The difference between finishing second and fourth, and I think Ciaran said this before as well on the pod,
11 million pounds
isn't huge. So if that's their motivation, again, in there that lies the problem. And on the whole Ollie thing, Ollie in, Ollie out, I don't have an issue with having to train the thoughts. The problem is it's the reasons why people sit on this side. So people sit on the Ollie inside because he's a club legend, because he was a great player, because he scored a famous goal. I'll tell you now, that stands for nothing, Haider. We were talking in the group chat earlier about, I don't know if anybody watched it who's watching today, Thierry Henry on Monday Night Football last night. Really interesting when they talked to him about his coaching career and how he was sort of taken aback how players really wasn't too worried about Thierry Henry, the player. There wasn't that sort of not that he said this, but in as many words he was saying, I would have expected players to be like, oh, it's Thierry Henry, and play up for him and be better. But he said, even though I was a great player, you have to remember I'm still a novice as a coach. And just because I was a great player doesn't mean to say that, I'm going to crack it as a coach. And, modern day players now, they challenge managers. And I'm sure that Ollie's got challenged at United. I could see at least 2 or 3 players in our
Bruno
I reckon challenges Ollie a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if Bruno challenged Ollie a lot. We know he looks disgruntled when he comes off. He looks frustrated at times on the pitch. And I would imagine people like Bruno are calling Ollie out. And there are footballers around like that now, the modern day football, that would do that. Back in the day, it was different. But now, reputation goes for nothing. So that's no reason to be Ollie in. But then you're Ollie out because what? Because he's not got much managerial experience because of the things he did with Cardiff. Look at some of the managers who are managing top clubs at the moment. Look at Flick at Bayern Munich. I never knew he was a coach before he got Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich playing some of the best football ever. Pep Guardiola, when he had the Barcelona job, nobody knew him as a coach. We knew that he obviously worked with the academy, but I understand people's positions, but I don't always understand the reasoning behind it, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, well said. Absolutely. Read out a few comments. One from Kerwin. Ollie probably welcomes it, which might be a good thing. Yeah, look, I think people think he's a soft touch and he's not. I think that's unfair. That's just on perception from the outside. All the reports suggest that he's not a soft touch. But there are times, for example, with the owners, and that's why we're talking about it here. And we'll finish off with the spend. We'll do that for the last 5 to 7 minutes. But in terms of the owners, don't protect these guys. There's a way. You don't have to. You don't have to cover for them. They're not family. They are not family. No, they are not family. They are taking your pocket money. They aren't giving you anything, mate. They are not giving you anything. They're taking your pocket money and they're making sure that you go to bed with an empty stomach. That's what they're doing. That is what they're doing. And at the end of the day, I wouldn't be standing up. I wouldn't be protecting these people. Maybe he's playing the game. Maybe he's being a bit more smart. But there's a way as well. You can put pressure on people by, turning the screw slowly, let's say. But look, guys, let's talk about this. Is grim reading. So if anyone wants to stick around and hear, United's spending since Sir Alex has left. Oh, it's
you've got this far, guys. You might as well see it through to the end.
You stayed with us for an hour and 55 minutes. Thank you, by the way. We weren't expecting to go on this long at all. But yeah, absolutely. So look, 13-14, we just won the league under Sir Alex Ferguson. Final year, the saddest thing ever happened. He left. Fellaini and Mata came in. Mata came in January. So that's a £69 million spent. Who went out? There were a lot of loans. I didn't write them all down because, strapped for time. But we saw Wilfried Zaha as well go for 1.6 million loan to Cardiff. So that was a net spend of 67.4 million. Remember, we were in the Champions League that season. It was a terrible season. We finished 7th. Liverpool trying to steal our crown for the worst defense. And then, Ciaran, I'm going to go on to LVG. So there's not really much to say there. So LVG arrives. We'd finished 7th. Now, this was a big outlay. Bigger than I expected, really. But 175 million was spent. So that included Di Maria, Luke Shaw, Herrera, Rojo, Blint, who should never have been sold, by the way. Daley Blint should never, ever, ever have been sold. And neither should some of these players that went out. Falcao came in as well. And then Welbeck went out. Probably shouldn't have been sold, in my opinion. Kagawa didn't really fit. Alex Butner, Zaha for 4 million. You're already seeing that United are very poor at selling. And then Evra went for 2 million. And Chicharito went for a 3 million loan fee. So we're looking at it. And there was even more, I think. Bebe went out as well. Keane, yeah.
Raphael
Keane went out for 2 million. Yeah, Raphael, I think, went out as well.
Basically, anyone who played in that MK Dons game got sold.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Makeda, Fletcher, Rio, Vidic, Anderson all went out. But anyway, look, the point is 45.3 million went out. So the net spend was 129.3 million. So we were out the top four and we spent a little bit more. Then we finished 4th in LVG's first season. Oh, God, the football was so drab, wasn't it? And then this was quite a big outlay as well again, guys. So look, we spent about 310 million in LVG's first 2 seasons. So, the idea that we didn't spend and we got into Champions League right now seems like it's not true. I think this is the only year that we did spend. But looking at it now, Ciaran, Martial, 54 million. He's probably one of the few signings. I know we've criticized him on this show, but he has been more of a success. Yeah, he has lived up to it. He's contributed. Is he Ballon d'Or level that we thought he'd be, or they thought he'd be? No. We've got Schneiderlin, 32 million. Terrible business. Depay, 30 million. Too early, a year too early. And Van Gaal knew this, by the way. He didn't want to sign him. He didn't want to sign him because he knew it was too early, but they bought him. Darmian, 16 million. Schweinsteiger, 8 million. He was crocked, wasn't he? And then you had Romero for free. And then out, Di Maria for 57, Chicharito for 11, Evans for 8 million, Van Persie for 6 million, Nani for 5 million. I mean, look, the money that's going out. Raphael, 3 million. And he had Cleverly go out for free as well. So look, the total was 92.8. So the net spend is 47.2. So my observations, Ciaran, how badly we spent. Only really Martial and Romero, I think, out of that group of players was a success. I think Romero's been good. And how low the fees are. But LVG got back, didn't he?
Yeah, of course. He got back. The biggest problem when you read that back out to me is actually the people that we were selling. And the funds that you were selling it for, you add those 2 years right now, and it's probably how much someone would have to pay Crystal Palace for Wilfried Zaha.
He was 80 million, people saying.
Like, if he wasn't working at the time, have a bit of forethought and send him out on loan for 2 years. Send him to Dortmund. Should have sent him to Dortmund or something for 2 years to play, because it means you still own that player. The fact that you sold him for that amount of money is actually criminal. Like, that's one that always stuck out to me. I also thought that we sold Chicharito too early because I think he had a really good season or two with Bayer Leverkusen when we sold him. Rafael had been playing excellent football up until probably this season, and he should never have been sold. And it goes back to what we said. Yes, Van Gaal was backed, but again, how much better would that have been if it was a manager that had the style of play that we wanted at the club? Maybe the money would have spent in a better way. Anytime you sign a player in the next season, you have to sell him is the biggest problem. And that's what happened with Louis van Gaal. We see it with the main signing is Angel Di Maria. I don't know about you guys, but when that came in, I was actually excited for.
So excited, mate. He had a good season. He got 10 assists. People forget.
Like
It was off the pitch, wasn't it, with Angel? It was just off the pitch. It wasn't quite right.
He didn't want to be there. That was a problem.
But that's that's the one thing that people criticize Solskjaer now on when it takes a while to get a transfer done. But he does a lot of the background research himself on the player and the person rather than just the player on the pitch. And it is important to have that. The one player that sticks out in even when we go through the Mourinho era as well, that I'm always disappointed with that didn't work is Memphis Depay, because I saw him even playing for Holland and the way we used him it wasn't his game. And it's one of those unfortunate ones that I probably would have preferred him like Wilfried Zaha. If it's not working at the time, send him out on loan to another league, let him get more game time. Bring him back in. If you don't want him to start in the Premier League, if he plays well in another league, guess what? You sell him for 40 or 50 million and not for whatever it was. I think it was 13 or 14 million, something like that.
We'll go through it now, actually. But yeah, I agree. Look, so we finished 5th and we're out of the Champions League. LVG sacked, winning the FA Cup. Jose Mourinho comes in. And this was a big summer. This is when I thought, yeah, right, things are happening here. United might be back. We saw the return of Paul. Yeah, we moved, mate. Paul Pogba came back. We had Mkhitaryan, who was absolutely sensational at Dortmund. And unfortunately, well, look, he's doing well in Roma right now. He's one of their key players, but it just didn't work out. 37 million. Eric Bailly for 34 million. In that first season, we all thought Eric Bailly was going to be the centre-back, really to take United. Be United centre-back for years to come. But unfortunately, with injuries, we've seen that. And when Zlatan Ibrahimovic came in, I really enjoyed seeing Zlatan at United personally. I know a lot of people don't like him, but I love the arrogance. We lacked that. And the day that Zlatan left, Joe, was the day that Jose lost control of that dressing room. You know, he was sort of keeping everyone in check. So 141 million spent. Again, what we're seeing is actually United are spending when they're out the Champions League. Who went out? Schneiderlin, we took a hit, 11 million. He went out for 21 million, 11 million pound hit. Depay for 15 million. Again, should have probably kept him and done something with him. McNair 4.5, Blackett 1.6 million, Keane 1 million. I think that's Will Keane rather than Michael Keane. Schweinsteiger, Powell, Nick Powell was a player I think under Sir Alex who probably would have been quite good. And Valdez again went out for free, so 43.1 million. Again, you're seeing how badly United have sold. That's the recurring theme. Net spend of 97.9 million. Look, guys, this is cold hard facts. What we're seeing, Joe. I'm just going to talk about. I'm going to talk about this. We'll do Jose's together.
Okay.
Wins Europa League, League Cup, Community Shield doesn't count. Finished 6th, but we got Champions League football. So we're seeing again how much did United spend. United spent a considerable amount, but the problem here, Joe, is look how big the fees are. Lukaku was 76 million. When do City go over 50 million on the transfer? Very rarely. Matic 40 million. We had Fabinho, who was almost begging to come to the club, and I love Nemanja Matic. I absolutely love him. The dream is for him to be 5 years younger, so that he would be so key for this United side right now. But again, short-term planning, and we've got a player now who's on a 3-year deal like Matic, who's just not got it anymore. Lindelof, 32 million. Again, apparently Jose wanted Van Dijk, I think was one of the names. And then Sanchez swap again. We all thought that Sanchez was a missing piece. That's 148 million spent. Who went out? Mickey the other way. Januzaj for 8 million. Again, I'm not so sure that was the right decision. I don't know. Pereira went out on a loan. Zlatan and Rooney left. Axel and Fosu Mensah went out on loan as well. The swap was about 30 million between Mickey and Sanchez. That's how much it was valued at. So the total that went out that season was 10 million, Joe. 137 million. So you're looking at the recurring theme. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
It's strange, isn't it? Because look, we've spent 2 hours talking about the Glazers, and those selling fees, they don't make sense either from a footballing point of view or from a sort of generating money point of view. You feel like even if they're selling those players to line their pocket for their estate or whatever, they're selling themselves short as well. So it's really weird, the sort of ones that they do. I mean, going back to Van Gaal, I mean, Johnny Evans one, I think he said he went for 8 million. The season after he had at West Brom, people were going to pay 20 million for that player. You know, Arsenal and Man City were willing to pay 20 million for Johnny Evans. Even United were linked with bringing him back. I mean, it's just absolutely ludicrous. Some of the deals that they've done there, absolutely crazy. And the problem is with like the bigger transfers as well. And you guys touched on it earlier. It's not even the fees so much, Haider, but how were they paying these fees? You know, we've talked about obviously they paid 80 million up front for Maguire. You know, it seems like teams who buy off us structure the deals really well. You know, the way that they do it in the installments, whereas United just seem to get done there, if you know what I mean, that department. And the other thing in that Jose Mourinho time as well is, I don't know if it was a media thing or actually if it was even a thing, but he always sent to have it used to be known in the media that there was 3 players for each position. So he used to have 3 top players at shortlist. Probably everybody does, but obviously it was quite a famous thing.
We have it now, A, B, and C.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, you look at it and you just think, it just always seemed like it was a second and third option every time under Jose as well. And therefore, how are you ever going to... I mean, you talked about Lindelof and you talked about he maybe wanted Van Dijk. We know he wanted Maguire as well, don't we? Maguire was obviously a player that he wanted. I think even he was keen on people like Boateng. I understood the club on that one a little bit because of his age and his injury record and the money that Bayern were wanting. But I just think you look at like when they got Matic, for example, it felt like Matic wasn't a first choice in that position. I think if the list is to believe, I think Eric Dyer was above Nemanja Matic.
Yeah, it went Dyer, Matic. Jose's list was Dyer, Matic, Fabinho. The club wanted Fabinho.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the issues, I mean, I'm looking at it here as well, like we spent a lot after we got into the Champions League. Look, we spent, again, 140 million. We've never really spent close to 200 in the season, but still, look, it's 140, 150. It's what we said at the beginning. Like, why are the Glazers terrible? One, it's not their money, but secondly, why have you got someone like Ed Woodward in charge? Why weren't you getting direct football? But Jose didn't want one as well, did he, Ciaran? I'm pretty sure he wanted Andrea Berta, but we're seeing comments about Marotta. Look, I'm not even going to talk about Juventus again, Zane. Like, we spoke about Juve last week. They've got great owners. The Agnelli family have passed Juventus down through the family. Agnelli grandfather bought it. It's just different. We're talking about people that are from Turin. They're Torinos. They are like, they live and breathe Juventus. We don't have that, so it's just not comparable. And yeah, maybe you have someone like Marotta, but at the end of the day, what we saw with United in the early days after Sir Alex is that the money was just loosely spent. And we know that money's been spent. Again, it's United's money, not the Glazers' money, so I'm not giving them any credit whatsoever for that money. But Joe, if we're having a look at it as well, United finished second. And we had the 18-19 window, which really was just, it was a joke. Fred for 53 million. How we ever spent for him by that much, I don't know. We had Dallo come in for 20 million, who's going to be on his way out, Kieran's favorite player. And we had Lee Grant, who somehow is still here. I know he's a third choice keeper or fourth choice now or whatever, but 74.5 million. So still a lot of money spent on 3 players. That's poorly spent. 75 million spent. And then you look in the outs. You have Daley Blind, 14.5. Again, why was he sold? You're looking at this team right now, and he could have played in centre back. He could have played left back. He's a bit slow, I know, but he could have played in defensive midfield where I thought he played his best football. Someone who's clever, who's got a little bit of that. It's such a bad move. Really bad move. Johnston went out as well. I'm really happy for him. He's had a good career, 6.6 million. Fellaini for 6.5. So look, this was obviously the summer. So Jose got sacked, and then Oli came in. So Oli sanctioned some of these to go out, or he okayed it.
Gotta be the cheapest transfer to China I've ever known. 6 million. I mean, everybody has paid over the odds for a player to go to China. I mean, Fellaini is the only one that seems to be a bargain out of all of them.
Oh, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah, can you imagine? So anyway, Carrick retired as well. So 27.6 million. So the net spend is 46.9. That's not good enough for a club like United, who've got aspirations. In that same time as well, Ciaran, I'll bring you into this. The observations I made at that time was that Liverpool finished in 4th and we finished 2nd. They went and bought Van Dijk and Alisson. So they went and improved, and that's what a football club does. They bought properly in 2 problem areas. They obviously got to Champions League final. United didn't. United haven't done that, so they were ahead of Liverpool back at the end of Jose's second season, and going into that third season, they were so close. The fact is that Liverpool went and bought the players necessary, and United didn't, and they stood still, and Liverpool surpassed them. And look, Liverpool have won the Champions League and the Premier League since then. Such fine margins. If they'd actually maybe given Jose the players that he wanted, it's like what we say with Oli. If they'd given them the players that he wanted, Ciaran, you don't know what would have happened.
Yeah, I find it difficult with Jose because some of the players that he wanted, I was against bringing in anyway. So to a certain extent, with Jose, I was fine with him not getting some of the targets that he had wanted because I didn't think it fit. It's completely different when I look at Oli, because when I look at some of the ones that Oli has wanted, it's all of them have pretty much made sense. Like, we can all agree that probably one of the biggest mistakes have made in recent years is actually not signing Haaland, because even if you did, you could be selling them for the 150 million that Dortmund want to get it now, or even if it went to that release clause. The release clause is 90 million now, so it obviously was able to be negotiated to be pushed up from the initial. I think what they were saying was 40 something million, and when all that was happening, that was a big problem. He identified that he wanted Jadon Sancho. So all of these ones made sense. With Mourinho, it didn't. But it goes back to the whole thing is, if your club is set up to, the players that they're going to fit the style of the club, and you bring them in, you'll see improvements. That's what Liverpool did. They fixed what they wanted from their team, and they went out and got the players that they needed to fix it. So you saw like Van Dijk, you saw Fabinho, you saw the likes of Salah, you saw Mane, Firmino all come in, and they get to a Champions League final, lose to Real Madrid, and what do? They go out and sign Alisson.
Also, one thing I do want to say, and I do always say it, but they've got a fantastic coach. Like, that shouldn't also be.
That's the point. That goes to it as well. When I say you figure out the style of the club, that needs to link in with the manager as well. And their first step was hiring the perfect manager to bring them to where they needed to get to. Their issue is always going to be, and you look at Jurgen Klopp and what happened to him at Dortmund is the exact same thing that's happening to him now. The question will be is, can he rebound? So can he get better and can he improve? I believe he can. I think having time off at the end of this season will do him the world of good. And I think that you'll probably see Liverpool be one of the strong favourites to win the title next year. The problem with United is we probably have a manager that can help build the squad, but we don't have a manager that can actually win the league and win the Champions League. And that's the biggest problem I have. We don't have the players, and I don't think we have that final manager to get you over the line. We always mention Haider, he can get you from point A to point B, but can he get you from point B to point C? Personally, I haven't seen enough to believe that he can. I've seen enough to believe that he can improve the squad.
Yeah.
And I've seen that, and that's what we needed first of all. But once you get, like, for example, if we got one or two other world-class players in, then you have to start deciding, well, can Solskjaer bring United to actually compete for a league and not just come second or third and be behind by 15 points? And if the answer to that is no, well, then when the right manager comes along, you don't just sack him just to sack him. When the right manager comes along, that's when you make the change. That's what Liverpool did. They saw that Jurgen Klopp became available, so they sacked Brendan Rodgers, and then he was brought in.
I kind of get that vibe as well. Like, is Oli the Brendan Rodgers for United?
I think
that's how I feel. I mean, what I will say as well, though, Ciaran, I'll bring you in as well, Joe, is that, when Jose got sacked, Oli came in, we finished 6th, obviously, but we had that good run. What I will say as well, Jose had to go. I really wanted Jose Mourinho. I've loved Jose Mourinho for a long time, but it was a right choice to sack him. If he was going to come in, he should come in like probably after Sir Alex. If he was going to come in, he was more at the peak of his powers. He isn't the manager he is anymore. It's the right thing he's gone, and I am happier. Even though I would always been a fan of Jose Mourinho. I'm so happy that he's not at the club right now, and I would prefer Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to Jose Mourinho. There's no debate for me. Seeing what he's doing at Tottenham, like the negative football, if people don't like what they see under Ole, well, Jose was worse. There's just no doubt about it. So, look, Joe, when we look at Ole's first season, really, he got backed more than any other manager. 200 million was spent. And this is where I probably sit here and think when people say he didn't get the players he wants. Yes, not every manager gets their first choices, right? He got Maguire, who was his first choice. He got Wan-Bissaka, who was his first choice. And when, Cohen's saying Mason wanted to leave. Yeah, he did. Kieran said that many, many times. Mason wanted to leave under Jose. And when Ole came in, kept him. Imagine losing Mason Greenwood and watching him go and become a 200 million pound player. That'd be heartbreaking. Dan James, I don't think he was ever meant to start. Bruno Fernandes should have been bought in the summer, and that set Ole back a long way, and that was unacceptable. And what were they doing that for? They were penny pinching, and that's where the Glazers come in. And 49.5 million, he came in January, and then Igalo on loan in January as well, 200 million. Looks like my brother's in the comments saying Arsenal to finish above. United next season, mate, lay off the crack. So that's 200 million. We got a troll in the comments. He's actually the one that does all the editing, and he's like the producer. So, what was that?
Are they finishing above Newcastle United next season?
In the Championship. So look, 200 million was spent. If anyone's sort of turning around and saying, well, Ole hasn't got anyone he wanted, he okays the players, Joe. He says yes or no. When people say Van der Beek wasn't his sign, that's just not true. He might have not been high up on the list because we know it's Jack Grealish, but Ole says yes. Ole's had more input on signings than any other Man United post Sir Alex. He's got a director of football now who is very, very, gets on well with Ed Woodward, and that should help in that relationship. So when people do say that, it does make me laugh a little bit because they spent more money in that season for Ole in that summer than they have for any Man United. Even when Sir Alex was here, any Man United manager ever. That's probably the most that United have spent in the summer ever, 200 million. And that's when you got a question as well. Then Joe, you got a question like, if you want to play a high line, why are you getting Maguire and Wan-Bissaka? I'm just saying these things. These are the manager's choices. So to say that he didn't get who he wanted, well, he's got three of his, three of the signings he did want to get.
I think Jose and LVG will be looking at it and thinking, wow, if only I had this sort of control over the players that come in, it might be, because you look at, like we've already touched on, the players that they wanted and didn't get. Even LVG, we hadn't really talked about some of the players that he wanted and get, like likes of Thomas Muller and people like that, you know what I mean? So I mean, the thing with Ole, though, is I think it's all right saying, obviously, he wants to play his high line and everything, but I think where United were when he took them over, he was literally looking for players. He had to start somewhere, and I think his recruitment has been a little bit like his coaching, in your opinion, and I have to agree with you a little bit as well, Haider, in the sense about this idea of getting you from A to B. So I think we bought players now that have got us to a point where we have improved. I think his recruitment on the whole has been pretty good. Obviously, Bruno's been fantastic. I don't think Maguire, look, I've got my doubts over whether we're going to win a league with Maguire.
He's improved. You can't even say he hasn't.
It was Phil Jones before that. If you want to lay it bare, Phil Jones, and even to a certain extent, I know Chris Smalling's done well for himself since he's left, but Chris as well. Wan-Bissaka is better at right back than what we had, even though, there are question marks over him as well. I agree. You look at who was there before, it was Valencia, Ashley Young. That needed to change. So his recruitment on the whole has been pretty good, but now it's got to go next level, Haider. And when you think about the players that he has tried to sign as well, to be fair to him, in the likes of Haaland and the likes of Bellingham and the likes of Sancho, I think Kieran's right. United no longer have an issue identifying players, and they're identifying players the right way now, because they're not just looking at the player, they're looking at the person. They've got this data analytic approach as well, which is going to help them. They're just, on the whole, I think you're going to find that they will identify better players as we move forward. But the Haaland one will always sort of leave a lump in my throat, because if you look back at that deal now, Haider, from Salzburg, United were worried about Riola essentially putting something like a 60 million, 80 million release clause in it. Right, let's just say we'd signed Haaland, and in a couple of years' time, you wanted to move on, like we said. In a couple of years' time, he'd probably be 140, 150 million pound player. If he goes to Real Madrid for his release clause of 80 million in 3 or 4 years' time, are United fans, if he's won us a couple of titles in that time, maybe took us to a Champions League final, won us a couple of trophies, are United bothered that he's
the biggest issue, Joe, is that in that whole Haaland saga, what did Dortmund do? They had 3 meetings with Haaland. They sat down, they prepared hours and hours of footage, and they'd had presentations on how Haaland's going to play. United turned up. He had a couple of conversations with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer because he knows him. United, they don't operate. Football is
it's not and
they want to win trophies. They don't want to, they don't want to.
I get that, but I think you look, if you had these players, that's what I'm saying. The chances you would be more successful. You would have a better chance if we were top at Christmas with Haaland in our team. Now we'd have been feeling a lot more optimistic than we were back at Christmas when we were playing it down. If we'd have been top then with someone like Haaland, maybe more points clear at the top if we'd have had Haaland as well by then, we'd have looked a bit more. And then you're thinking to yourself, well, if he wins the league this year, in a couple of years' time, if he wants to move on, I don't think fans are that worried that, you could have probably got 40 million more than you. I just think United, just the whole, and I mean, last week I was criticised on here for giving Woodward a bit of praise from a business point of view. But then actually, when you do look at it and the business side of a deal like that, it doesn't make sense, because that's where it falls down for me. And it's football business and it's commercial business, and that's football business. And to me, that was a no-brainer to bring it from Salzburg.
Absolutely. Ciaran, I haven't actually got the numbers for the season. Obviously, that's just passed, but we know it was a bad summer. I kind of want to just finish with you and your view. Zane's got an interesting thing. He's saying here, some people like... hold on. It's just bounced up. Some people like they were then... I don't know what that's meant to say, but essentially what you're trying to say is that, come on guys, you got to be better with your grammar, because obviously I'm reading these out and it's difficult. No, essentially I think what he's saying is, obviously we say about Ollie, we say, he needs, he didn't get the players he wanted. Woodward's got the players he wanted. Well, we're seeing with the other managers before him, exactly the same thing happened. Like Moyes didn't just want Fellaini, did he? He wanted Leighton Baines as well. So we're talking about these things. So last word for you. I'll give you the last word. But should fans maybe be a bit more objective and say, I know a lot of fans like Ollie a lot, but LVG didn't get Muller and people like that. Neither did Jose. So it should be the same energy, shouldn't it? Like if Ollie didn't get the players he didn't as well, then people should maybe even give LVG and Jose a little bit more slack as well, that they didn't get who they wanted. And ultimately, that's why we're doing this podcast. The people that had issues, the Glazers.
Yeah, look, I also think it's very similar that for a lot of teams, not every team gets their number one target, because there's a lot more that goes into transfers. Number one, it's not like these players are free agents where you can just sign them to a contract and if they want to come to your club, they come. It's more, if a team doesn't want to sell and they have the player on the contract, they don't have to sell the player. And so innately what's going to happen is you're not going to get every single target, but you will get some of them. And yes, we can say Ollie didn't get all of his targets, but look, he still got Bruno Fernandes, which is probably his main target. He got Aaron Wan-Bissaka, which was his main right-back target. He got Harry Maguire, which, okay, we don't know who his number one target was there. Okay, we didn't get Jadon Sancho. That was a huge deal. That is not always easy to do. Might get done this summer. And if it does, then that's another one you can't say. Yes, Haaland's the biggest mistake, I said, from the club. Because even regardless, even if there was a release clause, who cares? You'd probably make a load of money from it. You would have signed him for, I can't even remember how much it was. It was, 15 million or something like that from Salzburg at the time. Even if you had to sell him for 80 or 90 million and as a release clause, the amount of money you've just made, and you can then recoup that into a new striker. But instead, what we do is we don't sign Haaland and we don't bring in anybody to play. We bring in Odi and Igalo, and then we bring in Edinson Cavani, which even if you brought in Haaland, like, I don't know, you tell me, what if we brought in Erling Haaland and we had Bruno and Pogba was fit and healthy, how close do you think United are to the top of the league right now? Because how many of those games where we squandered loads of chances early on in the season, and the West Brom game, the Crystal Palace.
Still got an issue with your defense, so you can't win the title with that defense.
Yeah, but the difference is you can't win a title with it, but how much closer are you to Man City? Look at the amount of times we can't score. That's also a big issue. I completely agree. Defending is a big problem. And until you fix that, you're never going to win a title. But I don't think you have so much hesitation about where the team is going forward when you have that striker in place. You look at some of the best teams in the Premier League history. You look at even Man City when they had Sergio Aguero in top of his form. Even when their defense was terrible, they were scoring enough. If you have a good attacking side, if your defense isn't good enough, you do what some of the best teams in Premier League history have done. You score more than you concede. And that's what Ferguson used to do when our defense wasn't playing well in the season. Look, we didn't always have Rio Ferdinand and Nemanja Vidic. We did have some sloppy defending under Ferguson as well. But we had
terrible goalkeepers as well. Yeah. We had some terrible goalkeepers that did out.
Yeah, but we had it. And the difference was, what did Ferguson do? He made sure he had extra attackers so that you scored more than you conceded. And that was the thing. Like, it's ridiculous. I saw one of the lineups from 10 years ago or 12 years ago today, which had Berbatov, Rooney, Tevez, Ronaldo, Giggs, Scholes, and like that's what we did when the defense wasn't doing as well. He loaded up on the strikers. Think about it. Even there wasn't many seasons where we didn't have.
Well, the thing is, though, Ciaran, to counter that, I would say that Ollie's pragmatic. We know that. This side is capable of doing that, I think, as well. Not as good as them, but this side is capable where you can go and be like, right, because there's a lot of firepower. That's why I said that, I expected us to finish, or I wanted us to finish high up in the table, because there's a lot of firepower in this side. But when he is looking to protect the centre backs, and we will talk about this on a different podcast, but my sort of point on that is that he's not. It's not in his nature to go and be attacking first, if that makes sense.
Yeah, my biggest question, I always harp back onto the centre forward. I've always done that for a while. We've mentioned it before. I do think more creativity is needed in this side first, because it's going to cost a lot of money. But I also think if you don't have a proper centre forward, you're going nowhere. And if we say that we have brilliant attacking players, and we do, my biggest problem is you don't have an out-and-out goal scorer. Like, can you put Rashford, Martial, look, Greenwood's not ready yet to become that kind of out-and-out goal scorer, or Edinson Cavani in Bayern Munich, Man City, or any of the other really top clubs that score a lot of goals. Do any of them start? Personally, I don't think so. And that's the biggest problem. Unless you get that top striker. Look at all the teams that have been successful over a long period of time. You look at the Man City ones where you always knew Sergio Aguero was the main person you needed to stop. You looked at the Chelsea teams, and who did you have to stop? Didier Drogba. The United teams went from Ruud van Nistelrooy, Wayne Rooney. Then after that, there was like a mixture where you had Ronaldo, Tevez, Berbatov. You look at even Tottenham now. Who do you need to stop them? Harry Kane. The problem is United actually don't have that player and the reason why it's important is because if you brought in a top striker, it actually provides so much more space for Bruno, Pogba. If you brought in Sancho or Rashford, the problem is now is because we don't have a central striker, Rashford has always two players going on him. You've players pushing Bruno where he doesn't have enough space. But it doesn't have to be Haaland, but someone that's a good goal scorer that defenders actually have to watch out for is what we really need. And personally, right now, we don't have that. And that's the biggest issue. We can go through it and we can say we need a centre back, we need a backup right back, we need a defensive mid, we need a right winger, we need a striker. Realistically, we probably sign one main player in the summer and probably a backup in the summer, and that's it. And unless you're able to sell a couple of players, like I know there's like you go onto Twitter, you go onto Instagram or anything now related to United, and there's a new rumor every single day about a different position that United are gonna buy in. So that just shows you nobody actually knows anything about what United are doing. And that's the unfortunate part, is we actually have no clue about what are United planning over the next 12 months. Is it more important to get that centre half with Maguire? Or is it more important to get that right winger, to get that balance in midfield fixed? Or is it more important to get a striker? Unfortunately, the next time that United will be able to challenge for cups and challenge for leagues, you probably have to have a top player in every single one of those positions. And that's just not going to happen for the next 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Zane, I'm going to read out your comment at the end, because we're not crediting Ollie. Like, this is just nonsense comment. Bruno was a Jose target. So is Maguire. We're not crediting Ollie for that. Ollie, just because Jose wanted to play doesn't mean Ollie didn't want the same player. Like, I don't understand. There's a couple of comments here from you here saying that we're not validating with facts. It's very, very well known that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer says yes or no to players. People that think Wood was going and picking the players right now need to actually go and check whether their facts are right. Every manager you don't just buy your first choice player. We'd all love that, but you have 1, 2, 3. You have even 4 options going down. What's happened with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, what's happened with Jose Mourinho, what's happened to Louis van Gaal, this is fact, is that they all wanted players at number 1 that they didn't get, and they ended up getting second or the third choice player. So at the end of the day, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer also wanted Maguire. I'm not crediting him for getting Maguire. Like, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm not crediting him for Bruno. I'm not saying Jose also didn't want Bruno. He probably did want Bruno. Who wouldn't want Bruno? He's a top player.
People forget where we were, though, Haider. People forget where that defence was, mate. He had a right back of Ashley Young or Antonio Valencia and centre backs of Phil Jones and Chris Smalling. Now, I get people's criticism of Harry Maguire, but if that ain't an improvement on that, I'm sorry.
This is more at Ollie. He's having a dig at Ollie, like saying, "Oh well," and I'm not praising Ollie for anything. At the end of the day, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wanted Bruno Fernandes as well. 2 managers can want the same player. Pochettino wanted Bruno. Like, what if Pochettino had come in after Jose and he'd got Bruno? Like, I'd still be saying the same thing. It's not about crediting Ollie. Ollie has got the last say. That's fact. Go and check it out with anyone. He doesn't. He's the one that says, yes, I want this player, and no, I don't want this player. And at the end of the day, Van der Beek was a player he said yes to. He wasn't his first choice. Jack Grealish was. And that's fact as well. So you can go and look that up if you don't believe that. It's not my opinion on thing. We're just stating what has been fact. At the end of the day, he also wanted Haaland. Other top managers want Haaland as well. What if Haaland joins under a new manager? I'm not going to turn around and be like, oh, well, yeah, Ollie wanted him first. It's not about that at all. So, like, at the end of the day, you're saying to prove it in black and white. Do some research, mate. That's what you got to do. Do some research. You have Google, you have a computer, Google it, and I'm sure you'll be able to find it. That's it at the end of the day. This is not about having a go at managers before, because I wanted Jose Mourinho before I wanted Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I didn't want Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as a permanent manager. But at the end of the day, he's had more control than any other people. That's why I turn around and say these are Ole's players. Yeah.
Sometimes you don't need.
Ollie wanted Grealish, but Van der Beek was his second choice. That's fact. Yeah. So look it up, mate.
Sometimes you don't need black and white facts either, right? You don't have to be a football fan to see that certain aspects of what's going on at this club have improved and have got better. And just use your eyes. Just look around you. Listen to what people are telling you. Of course, you can't provide all the facts if we don't work at Manchester United. The only way we could do that is if we work at the club.
If you don't believe me, go and listen to Masterclass, and you can ask Rob Blanchard himself. He's got sources at Manchester United, and he will tell you. Now, if you don't believe him, but you believe, I don't know, some idiot on Twitter who's got no sources, and that's fine. That's up to you, but you're arguing with facts. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining us. It's much longer than we thought it would be, 2.5 hours. Honestly, it's been brilliant. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I hope you've learned some stuff as well. And look, the Glazers are still here. Yeah, Glazers out. But let's hope that we can direct our energy in the right direction and not fight with each other, because we've had different opinions on this show tonight, but it's been great to hear everyone else's opinions. It's been great to hear people that don't and people that do, but we were able to have a conversation properly in the chat. So thank you very much, guys, and we will see you next time.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.